IB Nation, welcome back. It's Notre Dame Recruiting Hour. It's Monday. We are recapping a fun week of high school football games today. We're also going to be talking a little bit of risers in recruiting rankings because we blinked our eye and we are 4 weeks already through the Notre Dame season. And there's some high schoolers that just finished up their 5th game of the season. So we thought, what a good way to kind of talk about and recap some of the players that have been playing fantastic football so far this year and talk about guys that may be deserving of bumps in their recruiting ranking. Because we know there's a couple guys that we've been talking about even into the summer, this past summer, that are probably a little bit underrated and a couple guys that are kind of bursting onto the scene. So we'll discuss some of those players that we think are going to take that big rise. Also talk about the recap from last week or this past week and weekend of players that dominate on the high school football trails and specific to Notre Dame. So we'll be talking commits, talking one game in particular that had a key target for Notre Dame as well. So want to take a look at all that. And then, of course, Sean, we're going to end the day with a mailbag. So there's already a ton of questions that are popping in here. So if there's any questions throughout the show, throw them in there. We'll be starting them all the way throughout. I am Ryan Roberts, the director of recruiting here at IrishBreakdown.com. Of course, joined by my guy, every Monday, Sean Davis, recruiting analyst here at IB Nation. Sean, this is a different type of feeling, man. This is a different type of feeling. I feel pretty good about Notre Dame football today after the big victory on Saturday, right? Like I feel better about it. Yeah. And we get to talk about not only the momentum that the team is starting to build with 2 straight victories, and now we get to talk about the future of Notre Dame football, some of these recruits, man. I'm a little jacked up for the show, my man. I got to be honest.
Look, my challenge to you, Vince and Brian, because I knew you were going to do it all yesterday, was to come away with the same feeling after you watched film. Like you were questionable on the postgame show, like, I don't know. But from the looks of it, you guys are very much still pleased and hopeful after watching the film against North Carolina. And one of the things I pointed out, I feel good because I feel like, and you pointed this out, for some reason people expected the head coach to hit the ground running at 36 years old with his first opportunity on the big stage as a head coach without understanding that he has to learn on the job. And the fact that he's been able to learn on the job, handle his first case of adversity, in my opinion, pretty well, and respond and get his team to buy in to whatever he said to them after they started off with 2 consecutive losses at the beginning of the season. So I am right there with you. Going into the bye week, facing 2 top 25 teams in the month of October with a chance to hop back into the top 25 if they run the table, you have to feel darn good about where the program sits right now. We're not talking about where expectations were before the season, college football playoff, that's gone, but just dealing with what is. The what is feels pretty good right now if you're a fan.
Absolutely. And if you guys want more in-depth feelings about what we think about the current team, as well as some recruits, hit up the mailbag section, right? So start throwing in. You don't even have to throw in a super chat if you don't want. If you want to, more power to you. But if you want to just start throwing in questions, again, we're going to star those and hit a lot of our opinions on Notre Dame football, college football. You want to ask us personal questions, recruiting, whatever. We'll answer anything during the mailbag. But Sean, I wanted to start about something in this recruiting hour with some fun news that you kind of got to see firsthand. So always fun when someone on the staff, on the recruiting staff, is able to be at a football game. Sean had the opportunity to take in the Mount Carmel versus St. Ignatius game this past weekend. Notable player in that game, of course, is Justin Scott, 2024 defensive tackle target. Mount Carmel, I believe, Sean, won 41-17 in that game. But just give me just kind of your impression of a couple Notre Dame recruits that were a couple Notre Dame targets that were in play during that game. And you told me that there was one player in particular, not as much on the Notre Dame radar yet at this point, that stole the show for you.
Well, let's start out. Had a chance, man. It was a nice fall night, a little crisp air in the low 60s, perfect way for a monumental Chicago Catholic League matchup. The game was tabbed as the game of the year because Mount Carmel was upset by Justin Scott and the St. Ignatius Wolfpack last year, which knocked them out of the number 1 seed or number 1 ranking. And the rematch was at Mount Carmel. We expected a tight game with really good defense, and Mark Carmel came out swinging. We went there to watch 24 linebacker Parker Starts from Mount Carmel, who has an offer, and of course, the behemoth himself, the dominant defensive tackle for St. Ignatius, Justin Scott from the class of 2024. That's why we were there, to watch both of those guys that hold offers from Notre Dame. And a 5'11", 185-pound running back named Darian Dupree. That name should be familiar. Darian Dupree was one of the running backs mentioned that was working exclusively with Dylan McCullough at the Irish Invasion. So when we gave you the report about the Irish Invasion, Darian Dupree, who does not hold an offer currently from Notre Dame, was mentioned. He is familiar with Notre Dame. He loves Notre Dame, but he is yet to receive an offer. Why is this important, Ryan? He stole the show in the game just in the first half. 4 total touchdowns, 3 on the ground, 1 through the air, 195 total yards in the first half.
Say it again, Sean. Say it one more time. In the first half.
Absolutely stole the show from Parker Starts and Justin Scott on that night. This is important because he has a viral picture that went viral probably about 2 weeks ago because a known head coach showed up at Mount Carmel to see him. And that would be none other than Nick Saban of the Alabama Crimson Tide. So if Nick Saban is showing up, then guess what? I'm willing to bet that offer from Notre Dame will be coming soon for the 5'11", 185-pound 4-star running back out of Chicago, Mount Carmel. He is definitely surging to be the best player in the state. He's the best running back in the state without doubt. And he's only a junior, so he's getting better. So once again, be on the lookout for him. He was at the Irish Invasion, and he wants that offer from Notre Dame. He has about 18 offers right now. They range from Big Ten teams to some MAC teams that were in on him early. Wisconsin, Nebraska, Michigan, they're all in on him. But now you start to see SEC teams being interested, getting that picture with Nick Saban that went viral, and possibly a visit down to Alabama later in the season. Look for Notre Dame to jump in head first and put in an offer to Darian Dupree coming up soon. The kid is going to be fantastic. He's absolutely phenomenal to watch.
Oh man, Chicago to South Bend, right? We're starting this. We're gonna keep it rolling. I love it, man. I love it. So Darian Dupree, get him on your radars. Like Sean said, no offer as of now, but it's clearly something that he is interested in. But you got obviously a good look at Justin Scott and Parker Stores to your conversation too. So,
and they were both great. It's not like they weren't great, but it was just like
one guy stole the show. Which he's a good football player, so no fault in that. I mean, like so, what is 195 and 4 scores in the first half? Yeah. Incredible, man. Incredible. Always love the insight, Sean. That's fantastic. It is a really interesting, kind of going off on a tangent for a second, really interesting running back board in 2024 for Notre Dame, right? Like everyone goes like Corey Smith, talk about Nate Palmer, talk about a couple of the guys down in Texas, a couple of Florida kids, Davion Gauze on the offer list right now. I mean, Sean, did you see, I don't know if you saw this, Aeneas Williams, who is out of Hannibal High School in St. Louis, Missouri. He just set the Missouri high school record for total touchdown in his career. And he's halfway through his junior year. Like, it's insane, man. He's got like 90-something touchdowns in his career. It's nutty, man. It's absolutely nutty.
A lot of people have a problem with the talent that he's facing or the competition he's facing. Sure. But still, that's phenomenal to put up the numbers. I don't care where you play. There are people trying to give you resistance on the football field. Mm-hmm. So it's not easy.
Yeah. It's man. This is like the Tayshaun Lyons conversation from a couple weeks ago, Sean. It's he had 303 yards. This is a play against the best competition in California. It doesn't matter. He had 303 yards in the first half of a football game. Like, it doesn't matter who it's against, man. It's nutty either way. But
exactly,
it's a perfect segue into some guys because Aeneas Williams is a kid in the 2024 class that has already started to rise up recruiting rankings this season, which is nice to see. But, Sean, let's get into that, right? There's several players that we want to bring to the table because we think they could be massive risers. And we're going to focus more on the 2023 class than 2024, because 2024 kids have a ton of time to rise, right? Like they have the rest of their junior year. They got the spring and summer. They got their senior season still. So they have plenty of time to make that ascension. For 2023, guys, it's starting to dwindle a little bit, right? Like we're halfway through senior season right now. So there's still time, but there are a few players that I believe are good enough players to bump up right now that are that talented, in my opinion, and are really starting to show the production on the field to warrant that. So, Sean, the first guy I wanted to bring to the table was a player that actually did not have the greatest week for Derby High School in the state of Kansas, but that is Dylan Edwards, who is, if you guys haven't seen him yet, so junior year, he ran for over 2,600 yards, averaged like 12 yards a carry, playing the running back position. He's 5'9", 165 pounds, out of Derby in Kansas. And Sean, he's a running back right now, but long-term at Notre Dame, he's going to be used more as a slot receiver, return man, gadget type player. Like they're going to use his versatility for him a lot. And so far this season, even with the, kind of average game or actually below average game for his standards this past game, he's just been killing it, man. I mean, almost every game he's averaging over 10 yards a carry. We've seen him make plays in the pass game, in the run game, and as a returner, and he's got legit 4.3 speed, man. He has a good argument as potentially the fastest player in the nation in the 2023 class. Not for Notre Dame, in the entire country. Legit 4.38, I think, is what he ran electric time. He ran faster than Peyton Bowen at the one event where he ran 4.38. So I got to start there, Sean, because he's a kid that I think has gotten overlooked because he plays in the state of Kansas. We talked about level of competition a little bit. Mm-hmm. He does play in the highest level in Kansas, so he's not playing against the scrubs in Kansas, right? But he's still playing in a state that is not known for producing a ton of talent, but he's dominating every single week, and I would not be surprised if he's a top 150 type of player ultimately when everything does kind of settle.
Yeah, the state of Kansas gave Notre Dame Xavier Watts, who was a big-time receiver out there and spurned Nebraska to eventually come to Notre Dame. And you talk about his speed, man. He's a football player. See, this is what I love about him and Jaden Lamar. You can talk about their speed. You can talk about how explosive they are. You can talk about how explosive Jeremiah Love is. But more than anything, they're football players. And that bodes well. The use of his speed, the jump cuts, the movement, the being able to not have to decelerate when he turns a corner to get around people, to just hit another gear. We saw it with the highlights that you posted in the weekly report last week in week 4 for the high school report that you put together each and every Monday. You guys check it out. If you haven't seen it, you can go follow Ryan right now on Twitter or on the message board, and it's right there. But I'm going to tell you something, man. To be able to get him in the program and to see what Notre Dame is adding in speed. We said something on the post-game show, Ryan. This staff can coach. Like that's what we're starting to see. Like, okay, they can coach. Yep. Like they're developing, they're improving guys. And when you know that type of speed is coming into a situation and a culture like that, you start to get real giddy. At least we do. Like, okay, I can't wait to see the results of this on the field, because you know what they're going to do. They're going to be able to bring a guy like him in and not only just be happy with him and his athletic ability, but knowing how to use him. That's going to be vitally important, knowing how to use him and put him in the best situations for him to be successful.
Well, and let's talk about how they can use him, Sean, for a second, right? Just this past game, we see the slide routes every game, right? Comes underneath, hit him quick in the flat. That could be Dylan Edwards. We saw this past game, Lorenzo Styles get a little touch pass and then race around for a good little game. We've seen the sweeps be used in the past, right? Like I'm talking about like the jet sweeps, but even if you want to put him in the backfield and just run a sweep outside with him with a couple pullers in front of him, kind of like a buck sweep type of thing, I'd be all for it, man. We've seen the screen game. We've seen the RPO game. We've seen the punt return and kick return opportunities that he could have. There is a lot that this kid can do, man. And there's a couple kids in the 2023 class that I think could also do some similar things. Like I think of like Peyton Bowen as far as like in the return game, but this kid is a much different player than what they have right now on the roster at Notre Dame, and he's different than even what they have for the rest of the 2023 class. Like you have Braylon James, who's the tall tree that can run for days. You have Jaden Greathouse, who's the big physical guy that can work inside and out. You have Rico Flores, who can work a little bit inside and out, but is more of the crafty route runner with pretty good short area explosiveness. This is the guy, though, that think of how Notre Dame probably should have used C.J. Sanders more in the past, or the Braden Lindsays of the world in the past. That's what I think Dylan Edwards could be, man. Legit 4.3 speed. So I'm excited about it, man. I'm really excited about it. Another guy I'm excited about, speaking of that, trending right next to the next guy that we had on our list, Tayshawn Lyons, Sean. We already talked about him, right?
Yeah.
Brother, my man with a broken finger had 8 catches for 303 yards and 3 touchdowns in one half of football, okay? Every game, he's getting like 125 plus yards. Last 2 games, he hasn't been posting the stats, but like he just said, he had 150 plus all-purpose yards in each one of those football games. This kid is putting up a ridiculous stat line, and we're starting to see him rise. I forget if it was 247 or on 3 that had him as the 120-something ranked player in the class now. But there's still a couple platforms that only have him as a 3-star. We wanted to use him in this riser because I think before long, you're going to see Tayshawn Lyons as a consensus 4-star kid, top 200 level type of player, maybe top 150 across the board. I think that potential is high there, Sean, because he is a legit athlete who is absolutely dominating the level of competition right now that he plays in.
Hey, just came from his visit. Loved his visit at Notre Dame. And it was almost like posting the stats. It's almost like he's disappointed. You could tell, like, he's like, nah, I don't like that. I'm trying to take it to the next level. Another kid that was questioning him is, like you said, who is he playing? Who is he going up against? Well, eventually you start to see that people are believing what they're watching and what he's putting on film, but because he continues to rise in the recruiting rankings. And once again, he's just another tall, playmaking receiver that might be joining the 2023 class. And that, what was the questionable room from a recruiting standpoint that we talked about, right? The defensive back room, right? And then you get Jay Mickey and Benjamin Morrison. Now, the wide receiver room, recruiting wise and depth wise, comes under the microscope. What does Notre Dame go out and do? They get the trio that's already in the fold with the possibility of adding Tayshawn Lyons to make it a quartet. And I don't know what to say. This kid just keeps getting better and better. And I don't know if he was being overlooked or he is just playing with a chip on his shoulder to prove, regardless of the competition, I'm just as good as the top guys in the nation.
I agree completely. And we just had Patrick Bird, who asked Lyons of 2023 or 2024. He's a 2023 wide receiver, Patrick. I think every player that we have on this list for today as potential risers are 2023 kids. So we're focusing mostly on the 2023 class today. Maybe we'll throw in a couple guys that are, worthy of note in 2024 that are really rising. Like if we're talking about those kids, though, it has to be like a dramatic rise. Like a kid wasn't ranked or seriously low ranked, and maybe they're one of the best. So I think there's a lot of fun players in this class. We had Archer already asked Sean. Let's take a stab at this one. 247 has Tayshawn listed at 6'2.5", 165 pounds. How many pounds would he need to put on to be able to realistically contribute as a freshman? For Archer, I would say first thing, just kind of seeing his body type. He's a very young-looking kid, so there's definitely physical development needs to happen. I doubt he's 6'2.5". I would say he's more like 6'1.5", maybe. His body, Sean, I don't know if you agree with this, but his body reminds me of Kevin Stefferson. Like that's who I kind of see body type-wise.
Yeah.
So I mean, he needs to be like 180-something pounds when he's a true freshman to contribute at a consistent level, right? Like I think that. Look, there's some questions about how quickly a wide receiver can even get on the field at Notre Dame right now as a true freshman, right? So I'm not predicting Tayshawn Lyons can go in day one and contribute at Notre Dame. But in order to match physicality, which I think is more the question, Archer, I would say if he's up to about 180 plus pounds, then he'll be able to match physicality as a freshman where his athleticism will take over. But again, he's not a kid that I'm not predicting that he's going to be a contributor year one necessarily, because we see guys in the 2023 class, Jaden Greathouse, Rico Flores, that are probably more of those guys that can probably step in and give you some snaps early on, Sean. But regardless, just wanted to throw it by you as well. 180 plus, like what do you kind of think as far as like the projection from a body type perspective?
Yeah, 180 plus is spot on. That's spot on. I don't think, which is perfect for me, right? I think we talked about this before when I had time to talk to Chancey Stuckey when he first took the job back in March. He talked about how he wanted his room to be like a starting five.
Yes.
In basketball, because, that's how he views the differences, where I think he wants the point guard to be a dog, but then he wants to have a couple of wing guys that are just like fast, athletic, can jump 50-50 balls. They're dogs as well, but they do it a different way. And I think when we look at all four guys that could possibly end up in the class, I'll go ahead and say it. Jaden Greathouse would be the point guard / point forward. He because he's so physical.
He literally plays point guard for Westlake's basketball team that just made it to the state playoffs. So it was
there you go.
So to your point, yeah.
So he would be like a point / point forward because he plays so physical and loves being on the interior and dominates. So, just knowing that that's how he wants his wide receiver room to look, you start to look at what he likes about Tayshawn Lyons and the ability for him to be super athletic, make plays after the catch, and to really kind of surprise people with how good he is. Because like I said, a lot of people are jumping in on him late, not only from a recruitment standpoint, but even just acknowledging how good he is at the wide receiver position.
Absolutely. And we just had Colin Park say Jay Greathouse equals Paulo Banchero from Duke. Yeah. Hey, man. I like Paulo, man. He's a good basketball player, so I'll take that. But yeah, Jaden, like I said, he literally plays point guard for his high school, so I like the comparison, right? Like, and he's kind of like he's got that old school feel to a point guard, right? Like he's physical getting into the lane. He's not like a super bouncy dude, you know what I mean?
Wow.
So love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I had another comment I wanted to pull up real quick because I thought it was interesting before we move on to the next player, but I can't find it. Where was it? Oh no. Let's stall here for a second. Can't find it. Someone called Dylan Edwards the Kansas Comet 2.0. Of course, original Kansas Comet was Gale Sayers. Don't want to put too much of the expectations on a young man, but I think he might be dubbed that pretty early by Notre Dame fans if he comes out and he plays good football. So love that little comment. Sorry, I couldn't find it up here, but Kansas Comet 2.0. Let's hope. Defensive ends. Armel Mukum is another player, Sean, that I think could take a nice little rise. He's out of Woodbury Forest High School in the state of Virginia. The most recent commit to the Notre Dame class. He is listed about 6'4", 250 plus pounds. We have a verified arm length because when they visit Notre Dame, they do get like the arm length measurements and stuff. We're told that he had an arm length around 80 inches, which is similar to Boubacar Traore, who we'll also talk about here in a second. So incredibly long, explosive hockey player from Canada, has only been playing football for one season. And this is the second season here as a senior. And I think for me, Sean, when I look at this player, this is a guy where coaching, if Al Washington's the real deal and he can get the most out of his defensive lineman, I think that this kid is just a ball of clay that is going to get molded into a fantastic football player on the next level, because we're not even close to seeing how good Armel Mukum is. Not even in the same stratosphere right now. And that's why I think he's due for a rise, because literally he's rated low right now, even though he has a nice offer list, because he just hasn't played much. Like they're just waiting to see more film on him.
This is where I have fun with you, Ryan.
Uh-huh.
Because your ability to scout guys, knowing and seeing the culture that this coaching staff and Al Golden being able to identify the best attributes and put guys in different positions that cause them to be able to give the best outcome. When you see someone like him that is as lengthy as he is and as twitchy as he is at his size with that length and that arm length, it's like, how can you envision? Like, tell me how you envision Al Golden getting him on campus and molding him and using him on that defensive line, because I'm sure it's so many different things that you can see from a talent standpoint that he might be able to do to say, yeah, this is how we're going to cause him to wreak havoc.
Well, I would say it like this, and this is a big claim, and I wanted to give Michael Parks a shout out real quick because he was the one that said the Candace comment 2.0. Thank you, Michael, for throwing that in there. Sean, for me, if this was a kid that had played 4 years in high school football, he was coming into his 4th year. He started playing when he was a younger kid, and he was really rounding out into the type of player he is. And it was just more about the mental acumen side of things and just kind of, continuing to get smarter from a football perspective. I wouldn't be surprised if this kid was a high caliber 4-star right now, maybe more. I don't know. I mean, that's projection at that point, but I think that schools like Alabama would be in on this kid right now. Like, I think he's that talented in that point, right? Like, I think that this kid, I think he's better than a few, or at least more talented than a few higher ranked players of similar body types to him in this class. It's just, again, he hasn't been playing much. There's a little bit of a boomer bust to Armel Mukam, right? Like, I think he could be a really good football player, but also maybe it never fully clicks, right? And then his time kind of gets passed up because he does need development moving forward. This isn't a kid that's going to start year 1. This is a kid that 2nd, 3rd, 4th year at Notre Dame, that's where he takes a huge step, in my opinion. So it's a little bit of a boomer bust pick, but I don't think it's out of the realm of I don't think it's ignorant of me to say that this kid's an SEC level talent at the defensive end position. It's just he hasn't been playing football for very long.
I'm just excited about a guy like this, right? I wanted to say he reminds me kind of Nana in a sense. And I don't know, he probably is a little longer than Nana, but Nana, you're starting to see him come on, like in the last 2 games.
He's playing good football, yeah.
He's playing really good football. He hasn't really flashed as far as pass rush yet, but then I think Armel, his pass rush ability, to me, is really scary.
Yes.
Like, I think he's really scary. I think he might be. Did you say this last week? Did you comp him to Adi?
I said that so it's weird, right? Because his body type right now is kind of like Adi's. Adi ended up being like 6'4", a hair over 6'4", 255 with his 35-inch arms, right? Like just a lengthy, ridiculous kind of wingspan. But the thing about Armel is that Armel's that size right now. Like, he could be even bigger, man. Like, he could be 270 plus still playing defensive end because he's got that kind of frame. He's well put together kid. But yeah, I think I have said in the past that Notre Dame has had success with guys like Adi Ogundeji. So why wouldn't they take a chance on a kid like this?
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe Khalid Kareem. That might be a decent comp too. Like in that frame though, right?
That's
like
good. Yeah.
Strong side defensive end, 6'4" plus, vines for arms, and physical. I mean, Khalid Kareem was more about like 265-ish his senior year, right? Like that was more kind of his ballpark. So he was even bigger than Adi was. But I think I settled on Adi a little bit because Adi was also raw coming out of high school. Like he was committed to Western Michigan before he ended up flipping to Notre Dame. So it wasn't like Adi Ogundeji was a guy that was going to come in year 1 and just be a stud. But by the time he was a senior, I mean, he led the team in sacks this last year. Like Adi Ogundeji turned himself into a good football player and was drafted. So yeah, I think that's an interesting comp. Sean, I'm going to throw a name out there, and I want to get your thoughts first to start here, right? Okay. So wanted to throw out another defensive end in the class. 2 sacks this past weekend for Catholic Memorial, up there in Massachusetts. And we'll get to some of the recaps from last week. We're going to keep it a little more brief this week. Boubacar Traore, Sean, another guy that is 6'4", 255 pounds, similar body type to Armel Mukam.
I mean, what else do you want to say? Boubacar, for me, you know what? Boubacar, for me, it's unfair. Yeah, I'm going to say this. Boubacar, for me, when I saw him, I was like, yo, okay. I like the physical traits. And then when I saw Armel Mukam, I was like, wait a minute. I shouldn't be liking the second version better than the first. But, I was kind of caught in the present and almost forgot about Boubacar. But from a developmental standpoint, and I don't even strike that from the podcast. All right, I'm
Cut it
not
out.
using developmental because these guys are just really good football players. They just are. They're physical football players, and I truly believe if they come in early, I'll make this prediction now. If both of them come in early, they'll play their freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, they'll be ready to play
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
come in early. Now, if they come in the summer, but if they go through a full off season with Matt Balis, when it comes to spring and fall, they'll be ready to compete and ready to play. And there will be plenty of opportunities on that defensive line when you lose. I believe they lose Howard Cross. I believe they lose Lacey. I think Lacey might have 1 year left, if I'm not mistaken. You lose Isaiah Foskey. You lose a Jason Adamiola. There's opportunity there. You lose a Justin
Maybe
Adamiola.
Justin Adamiola too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now
Yep.
there's opportunity there. And even though you have guys like Riley Mills, Gay Nabira, the emergence of Josh Burnham possibly coming from
Tyson
that
Ford.
edge, Tyson
Yeah.
Ford, all of those guys in the waiting. Who else? Gabriel Rubio, Jason Onye. Those guys are waiting to get an opportunity, but that 23 class will come in with an opportunity as well. And physically, if they can hold up, you might see them on the field early.
Yeah. No, I agree. So Boubacar for me is a kid that physically is ready to play right now. He's just, continuing to figure out, continue to improving the flexibility and just kind of playmaking ability. But again, 2 sacks this past weekend for Catholic Memorial, who they got their season off started. That's kind of just how Massachusetts does it. They started off a little, they were only in their second week this past week. So wanted to bring up this. I wanted to save all the super chats until the end, but I think that we have to pull this one up right now, Sean.
Okay.
Bob's and idiots. Thank you so much for the super chat, first and foremost. Said, I'd like you all to welcome All's There Quinn. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the first name. If you want to give me a pronunciation, but I'd like to welcome All's There Quinn to the Irish Breakdown family. I'm still in the delivery room. Go Irish. Oh, man, that's loyalty to the IB Nation right there, Sean. My wife would slap me if I had a podcast on while my wife was in the delivery room.
What was your experience? Because I was scared to cut the TV on. I was scared to cut the TV on.
So my wife went into labor. It was during COVID. So I was the only one allowed to be in the waiting room or anything, right? So drove her to the hospital. I had to wait 20 minutes to come in because they were only allowed to they had to bring me in separately from my wife. So my wife is in labor, having to go into the hospital by herself, wasn't allowed to walk her in, which is absolutely ridiculous. They end up calling me about a half an hour later, like, hey, you can come in now. I get up there and Sean, they gave her an epidural. But she was having the baby like right after she got the epidural. It was like a 5-hour delivery. So I didn't even wait in the waiting room, man. I was in the delivery room the entire time. I even held one of her legs up during the labor, which was bizarre, but whatever, man. Either way, it was a great moment, obviously, because I have Juliet in my life. But regardless, I didn't even spend any time in the waiting room, man, because I wasn't allowed, I don't think. I don't think I was allowed to leave that room. They're just like, you have to have your mask on. You have to stay here, right? Like, you can't leave. Yeah. So, yeah. So it was.
Do you remember the first thing she said to you after your daughter was born?
No, I actually don't. It's probably terrible of me that I don't, but I do not remember.
Literally, my wife gave birth to our daughter, and I check and make sure that my daughter's okay. And I ask her, is she okay? She says yes. And she looks at me and says, can you go get me a 4-wing mild sauce from Harold's?
That's funny.
True story. It was the first thing out of her mouth. And I looked at her and said, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm hungry. I'm so hungry.
Oh, this is fun. Now we're talking about our experiences of childbirth here. So Archer just said, Ryan, we had a baby right before COVID, had a month-long hospital stay after birth, and came home just a couple days before lockdown. Archer, good timing on your part, my friend. I'll say this, for the next child we have, hopefully, with how things are right now anyway, my parents and my wife's parents will be able to be in the waiting room this time, which will be nice. Like it was a little weird this first time, man. It was a little weird. So congratulations again,
Congrats.
Bob,
Congrats.
on the birth of the child, man. That is fantastic. It's a great moment. Great moment. So back to this conversation, though. I just wanted to pull that up because that's just awesome. And everybody, please throw in your congratulations to him in the chat because that is fantastic for Bob and his family. So we're going to go to the next guy, Sean. Last guy that I had on the list, and then you're welcome to throw in anybody else that you just kind of want to give a quick shout out to. But a guy that I was very honest that I wasn't I'm not a fan. That's not a right way to say it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't like super, super high on this player, right? Like I thought he was a good football player, but like I wasn't incredibly high on the take at the time. And that's Ben Minich out of Lakota West High School in Ohio.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's some underrating on my part because I just didn't see a great athlete on film. And then also he's next to Malik Hartford all the time. And you're like, oh, that Malik Hartford's a dude. Like, he's a dude, right?
Yeah.
So seeing him next to that guy, I think is unfair for him at some points. But I'll say this, Sean, he has been fantastic this season on offense, at the safety position, blocking a punt during one game. Ben Minich is a good football player, man. I think he's a 4-star level player. I wouldn't say he's a top 200 caliber player or anything like that, but he should be a borderline 4-star prospect, in my opinion. I think he's had a great season for Dakota West.
Yo, when I saw the 73-yard touchdown that he had early in that game this weekend, I'm like, oh, okay. And my comp for him has always been, I don't know size-wise how close they are, but I mean, Drew Tranquil blew up a lot when he got to Notre Dame because he was making the switch to linebacker. He started out as safety, and when he made the switch, I think he put on about 15 to 20 pounds. But just like you said, being underrated, an underrated guy in the class, playing next to Malik Hartford, he's going to be the type of guy you need in your locker room, right? Why? He would know how to play next to a Peyton Bowen because he's been next to Malik Hartford. So he knows, like, yo, I know what I need to do. I know how to compliment him. I know how to play with that type of guy that's a big-time guy. And I think that's the type of glue young man he's going to be and leader he's going to be when he gets to Notre Dame. It was interesting that when he came for his visit during the Cal game, I'm sitting there, and most people, they understand who Drake Bowen is, and they kind of stand in the background, and Ben was right there up front next to him like, yeah.
I'm here too. Yeah, I deserve to be here too.
And
exactly.
I was like, yo, I'm going to bookmark that and take note of that because I want to watch how his career develops when he gets here to Notre Dame.
100%. I think the one thing that I underrated was that there's a pretty nice baseline with Ben Minich, At worst, I think he's going to be a really good special teamer and backup safety. Like, could he be more? Maybe. We'll see. But regardless, I did think that I underrated him a little bit.
Could he gain weight and end up at Rover?
You never know, man. I mean, right now he's about 185 pounds, but like if Notre Dame wants to play the Rover more like Isaiah Pryor played Rover, then if he can get to 205, 210, maybe, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's possible. So, yeah. Man, we got some wild stories in here, right, Sean? I'm going to bring up a couple of these. I know we're going off on tangent. Micah Cook said, right, I delivered my daughter in the front seat of a Chevy Impala. Doesn't sound like fun, Micah. But
it's not the most sterile place to deliver a baby, but
hopefully it was clean before the baby came. Yeah, but that's funny, man. That's a really funny story. Also saw Mike Sullivan said, Doctor told us it was going to be a few hours, so I went and purchased a new car. Yes, I made it back with 30 minutes to spare. Can you imagine if you missed it for a baby, man? For a car?
Yeah. But technology now, you can actually have the car delivered to where you are now with these apps.
Did I tell you I bought a car on rentacar.com? Okay. Bought a car right over the internet. Yeah, it works, man. I was like, I got a good price on it. They dropped it right off. I'm like, dope. Like, that's dope, man. They let you drive it around and test drive it and look at everything before you sign the final on the dotted line. I'm like, dope, man. Like, cool. And it's been perfect. So I haven't had any issues with that car. So, rentacar.com. Quick plug, I guess, for rentacar.com.
Right?
Yeah. So, Sean, that's the list that we want to go through. Real quick, I want to work through it. And I put this in the chat earlier, but I'm going to put it in the chat again. This was the article that I dropped this morning on some of the key performances from this past week from high school players. So if you want to follow along or you just kind of want to see it out loud, feel free to just kind of look through that if you want. But we're going to kind of recap a few of these players just kind of right now in this podcast. So Sean, I think what we'll do here is I'm going to work through. I picked 3 offensive players, I picked 3 defensive players, and I picked one player that. Well, I picked a matchup at the end, right? So 3 offensive players, 3 defensive players, and then one game matchup that was pretty cool. So let's work through the offensive players. I'm just gonna go through the 3 offensive players I had, and if there are any players that, if you want to comment on any of them or just start the conversation with the offensive guys, let's do it like that. So had to throw CJ Carr a big shout out. His Saline team beat Skyline High School 49-6 out of the state of Michigan. If anybody remembers Skyline, that was where Dalen Hayes played his senior year of high school. So CJ threw 4 touchdowns in this victory. It was 17 out of 22 for 239 yards and 4 touchdown passes in that victory over Skyline High School. And, Sean, we said it, like after an uneven first week, a little bit inconsistent, he has really put it together over the last few weeks. So CJ Carr is playing high-level football. Jaden Greathouse was the second guy I wanted to throw a bone to, because Westlake High School beat Lake Travis in a big matchup, 35-20. Lake Travis is a very good program out of the state of Texas. He had 6 receptions for 66 yards. So not a crazy day for what Jaden Greathouse usually does, but the key in this one, Sean, was that he had 2 touchdown receptions in that matchup. So he had obviously a big impact on this football game, winning 35-20. Next week they are going to play Del Valley, who is the former high school of Braylon James, and they're only 1-4. So Austin Westlake has it rolling a little bit, man. And the last one, I had to throw a vote to an offensive lineman, man. Sullivan Absher, quietly. His South Point team is 5-0, Sean.
Yeah.
They just defeated Huss 35-7. This game, they ran as a team offensively for 226 yards and 4 touchdowns, which is a good day at the office, but it's actually lower than their season average. They average over 300 yards rushing a game. In 5 games, they have run for 1,612 yards as a team. They've scored 24 rushing touchdowns, just rushing touchdowns, and they're averaging 7.5 yards per carry. So need to throw a bone out and a quick shout out to Sullivan Absher, who's playing really good football for South Point, and he has them sitting at 5-0 heading to Crest next week. Crest beat them actually beat South Point last year 27-26. So a little bit of a revenge for Sullivan Absher. So Sean, those are the 3 players offensively that I just wanted to give quick shout outs to.
Yeah, and we would be remiss if we didn't mention the big matchup out west between Folsom and De La Salle this weekend that went down to the wire, final seconds. Rico Flores and his Folsom team, back-to-back years, upset De La Salle. They win 24-20 this year. Not any big stats or anything like that. It was a very, very defensive-minded game. Went down to the wire. Cooper Flanagan did work on the defensive side of the ball.
Oh, yeah.
He continues to shine on the defensive side of the ball. So we'll see how that develops. He's being recruited as a tight end, but he's playing so well on the defensive side of the ball this year that who knows? They might want him on the other side when he actually sets foot on campus. But another fantastic game and great matchup out there. Folsom goes to 4-1, and then De La Salle falls down to 3-2. But it was a great matchup.
I need to look up the last time that De La Salle was 3-2, man. It's probably been a long time. I saw a stat on that game, Sean. Folsom actually beat them last year in the playoffs. So they beat them back-to-back years. It's the first time that a team has beaten De La Salle in back-to-back years in like 40 years, man. Yeah. Like a crazy, crazy number. So shout out to Rico, who they had a late touchdown. It wasn't Rico that scored it, but they had a late touchdown to win the football game. Mm-hmm. But Cooper Flanagan did his thing on the defensive side of the ball, especially to your point. Like, again, Sean, I'm not saying he'll ever play defense at Notre Dame because I think he could be a really good tight end, but I would keep the options open, man. He's a big kid. He's got some good film at defense this year. Speaking of Cooper Flanagan. So we'll see what happens. Either way, he's a really underrated football player also in this class, in my opinion.
You know what?
Yes.
He's going to come in with some pretty good tight ends in front of him. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. Yep. You're not wrong. You are not wrong, sir. I mean, that tight end room over the next couple of years is going to be silly. I mean, Eli Raritan, Holden Stays, We'll see if Kevin Bauman comes back. I know he's dealing with the injury now. He's going to be out for the season. I feel like I'm missing a couple more. Kane Moran, who's a talented football player. Mitchell Evans, who's hurt, who played a lot of football last year. That tight end room is going to be dumb, sir. Like, it's stupid deep. So, yes, Cooper Flanagan is walking into a situation where, like, hey, maybe they look at him and just go like, Cooper, like, you can sit on the bench for a couple years as a tight end, or you can go play defense right now and compete. Like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Regardless, defensive side of the football. I want to throw out this real quick, Sean. So I picked 3 players on the defensive side of football. First one was Boubacar Traore, who we mentioned before. Catholic Memorial defeated Algonquin Regional 46-0. So far this season in 2 games, Catholic Memorial has outscored its opponents 93-7, by the way. So they only give up 1 touchdown in 2 games. Boubacar had a little bit of a quiet game the first game. This game, he had 2 sacks. And also, Gerby Lambert plays for Catholic Memorial on the offensive side of the football, offensive tackle. He's another guy, 2024 recruits that Notre Dame has taken a deep look at. So, a couple really talented football players for Catholic Memorial. Boubacar Traore had a big impact in this game, 2 sacks. Drake Bowen, Sean, who probably had his best game of the season so far. I don't think that's a big stretch in Andrean's 24-17 victory over Hobart. Offensive side of the football, he ran for 203 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not a bad day at the office. But on the other side, Sean, 17 tackles and a sack on the defensive side of the game, man. He was out of his mind. And then, not a gaudy stat line, but wanted to throw out what Denton Geyer's doing so far this year. They're sitting at 5-0. They just defeated Little Elm 49-21 out of the state of Texas. And I just wanted to throw out, Peyton Bowen's on the team. 2023 committed safety. Eli Bowen, the 2024 target at cornerback, is a really talented player. They got Ryan Yates in the secondary. They have a lot of really talented football players at Denton Guyer, and they are looking to avenge a state championship loss last year, 40-21 against Westlake. So Denton Guyer's off to a great start, but man, hard not to be excited about what Drake Bowen is doing so far this season, especially this game, man. He was absurd in this game.
He is, and I can share a tidbit of a conversation we had. They started off the season similar to Notre Dame. They were 0-2. But they played ranked teams in the state of Indiana. They're a 2A team, and their schedule is not a 2A schedule. They play the best of the best. They came across the border and played one of the best teams in the state of Illinois in Crete and came away with the victory. And I remember the conversation after the second loss, and he was just sharing some things. And my advice to him was, the season's not over. You came back to win back-to-back championships, or your goal was to win back-to-back championships on your way to Notre Dame. It's still right there before you. And I told him one thing: you got to lead. You got to lead. And in Drake Bowen fashion, you know what his response was? Yes, sir. That was it. Yes, sir. And after that, you go watch every game. He's doing it on both sides of the ball. Like, hey, guys, follow me. Follow my lead. Let's go do it. And you talk about the stats, but he had a big-time play to stop a first down late in that game.
Yes, he did.
As well.
Yes,
so
he did.
He is a true leader in every sense of the word. And to have him come into this camp, look, I don't care what recruiting services are saying. I've seen enough speed. I've seen the speed and agility on the baseball field at shortstop, at third base, stealing bases. So don't listen to these recruiting services. You're getting an ultra talented, uber athletic young man coming in the 23 class at the linebacker position.
Looks like his younger brother, Dylan Bowen, is a good little player as well, man. Freshman.
Dylan looks at himself. I think that entire family loves baseball.
Yeah.
They love baseball, and baseball might truly be their first loves. But Drake really loves football. Dylan, on the other hand, is a baseball kid.
Yeah.
He kind of plays football, but he's starting to kind of grow into football, and football's growing on him a little bit more. But Dylan is baseball-wise. Dylan might be that dude. Yeah. Great athletic family, man. Great athletic family.
And a great person, Drake Bowen speaking, right? A great coming from a great family. And I said this before, Sean, I'm going to stick with this, man. I would be surprised if Drake Bowen's not a captain at Notre Dame, but maybe a multi-year captain, man. Like, he's
Man,
that type of dude, man. He
yeah,
really is. Like,
he is.
even if he doesn't end up being a stud of all studs on the defensive side of the football, he's still going to be a leader.
Yeah.
Like, he's that dude. He's just that dude. So I really like Drake Bowen a lot. So glad to want to throw him a shout out. The last game I want to talk about, Sean, of the high school football circuit this past weekend, before we get into a little bit of college football talk this weekend. Christian Gray's team, the Smet Jesuit, played against Christian Brothers out in the St. Louis area. Christian Brothers ended up winning this football game 49-28, Sean.
Yeah.
And honestly, it wasn't even that close, if we're being honest. Like, it was 28-7 at halftime, I believe. And I think Jeremiah Love opened up the third quarter with another touchdown. So it was 35-7. Shout out, though, to the Smet for not giving up like they did. They came back a little bit and they played hard, obviously. But wanted to shout out Christian Gray, another talented corner in the class. Christian Gray had a nice long kick return for a touchdown, which was kind of the highlight of his day. I watched the game streamed-wise, and seemed like to me that Christian Brothers was just like, we're not going to test 29 too much, we're going to kind of stay away from him a little bit, which probably a very smart idea, if I do say so myself. And then, but on the other side, Sean, the real star of the show was Jeremiah Love, who's a 2023 running back target for Notre Dame, which, I mean, he's the top offensive player left on the board for Notre Dame. Main catalyst for this team, 119 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on 17 carries. Sean, a crazy stat. He's a player that I love for the versatility aspect. He's told me in the past, like, I could play wide receiver on college level if I wanted to, or if a team wanted me to, I should say. Coming into this game, they only had 17 yards on 1 reception on the season. So he had not been using the passing game at all. In this game, though, he had a 72-yard touchdown reception. He had 3 catches for 96 yards. So my man had a season-high 215 all-purpose yards. Jeremiah Love got the best of Christian Gray in this one, but I like that you kind of saw them kind of go back and forth a little bit of – you could tell that they have a friendship there, right, which is kind of cool to see.
Yeah, you can tell they have a friendship and admiration for one another. And this Met is a very, very good football program, but Christian Brothers has been a thorn in their side for the last 3 seasons. Gave them the only 2 losses last year, 1 regular season, 1 in the playoffs. And just the difference in talent, right? And in that game also was Jeremiah McClellan, I believe, for Christian Brothers. Played in that game as well, 24 wide receiver.
Good call. I should have said also when we're talking about Andrean that Patrick Clax continues to have a good season as well. But yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you got to see a lot of what Notre Dame is looking at and sees in that matchup. Christian Gray, I messed with him a little bit. I was like, man, he had a big return after Jeremiah Love's long touchdown pass and reception touchdown. And I'm like, dude, you can't let the kicker tackle you, dude. Like, you can't. Like, that's a touchdown. And he was like, man, he grabbed me around my collar. That was a penalty. And it's like, but it was fun just being able to go back and forth with him. Christian's had the opportunity to go up against Carnell and some friends that he has on the IMG squad, and to go up against Christian Brothers. And he's just ecstatic about being able to compete. And he still feels like they're going to have a good team at the end of the season. And he looks forward to possibly facing Christian Brothers and Jeremiah Love in the playoffs. Probably have the same outcome, but that's just the competitor he is. That's the competitor he is.
Christian Brothers is a good squad, man. The Smets they've had a daunting schedule so far this season. Like you said, IMG, Christian Brothers, they've had a tough little schedule, man. They have, but they're a good football team as well. And he's another player for me. Christian Gray is a kid where he's one of the main recruits that even when it was kind of not going so well Notre Dame season-wise early on after the loss to Marshall stuff, he's just like, man, we're going to change stuff, it's us. We're going to figure this stuff out. We're not just going to decommit just to decommit type of thing, which was cool to see. So, yes, shout out to Christian Gray for being the upstanding young man that he is. Of course, shout out to Jeremiah Love for getting the dub in this victory. He had 2 70-plus yard touchdowns. Notre Dame's hoping that they can close on this one with Jeremiah Love here very shortly. So that's going to kind of do it for the recap of this past weekend from a high school football perspective. Now we are going to get into a little bit of a college football roundtable, man. So we're going to talk about the college football week of action. It was a very entertaining week. Before we talk about some of the games for this past week, if you could please like, share, subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are also very much appreciated. We're going to get to some college football talk. All right, Sean. So I think a good place to start here with some college football talk from this past weekend would be Clemson's 51-45 overtime win over Wake Forest. So, Sean, I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings watching some games with my buddies, all right? And if you saw my prediction for this past week from a Clemson Wake Forest perspective, I picked Clemson to kind of hammer them. I think I ended up picking like 31-18, but I said I think Wake's going to score a late touchdown. It's not even going to be that close. Give Wake some credit, man. They were battling in this game. Yes. I don't think Sam Hartman's much of an NFL draft quarterback prospect, but Sam Hartman is an excellent college football player. There's no doubt about it. They went back and forth. This was an offensive game it turned into. After Wake Forest only had 4 yards rushing in the first half, and they ended up really kind of tearing up Clemson's defense a little bit in the second half, man. So, Sean, just some of your impressions of this game, man. This was a little bit of a wild one to kind of follow.
Woo, that Clemson secondary.
Does not look good. Oh,
boy.
It wasn't even A.T. Perry. A.T. Perry had a touchdown, but it was number 80, who's like a sophomore that had 9 catches for 90 yards coming into the game, but he had $150. It was insane, man.
Yeah, and kudos to them. They came in, and their offensive line has gotten so much better at Wake Forest because the slow mesh usually is not successful against the aggressive play. And I'm shocked to see – I saw Simpson was favoring his shoulder late in the game, the linebacker for Clemson. So I'll be interested.
Great player.
Yeah. Yes, he's a great player. If they have to miss him anytime, that definitely can affect the defensive side of the ball. But I thought Wake, after getting down early, their response and the way they punched back and countered was fantastic. There were times that in the game late, the fourth, where I thought, Wake's going to win this. Wake's going to win this.
Yep.
But kudos to DJ.
Yeah, he played a good game.
Look, you can say what you want to say.
And I did on Twitter that I don't think he's very good, but he played a good game that day.
DJ and his wide receivers showed up, and they have Ngata and what was it, Collins?
They got 2 Collins kid, Bo and Dakari Collins.
But the freshman is the one I'm scared of.
Williams, 0, right? Number 0? Yeah. He's a good player.
He scares me. He was making plays down the field and he was making plays inside as well. And I'm like, okay. By November, he's gonna be pretty good.
He's gonna be the guy. He's gonna be the guy because everybody else is kind of the same guy. Sean, they're all 6'3", long arms, catch point guys, and then this freshman Williams, number 0. If you haven't watched Clemson, he's got a little juice to him, man. He's got a little explosiveness, So he's a different football player. A couple of takeaways I saw, man, is Sam Hartman, for one, played a great football game. Really good football game. He ended up throwing 5 or 6 touchdowns. DJ ended up throwing 5 or 6 touchdowns in this game. So it was an offensive battle, which was the thing that took me biggest by surprise, though, Sean, was Clemson's defensive line has studs on it, right? Brian Bresee, Miles Murphy, all those dudes. They have Trenton Simpson at linebacker you talked about. The Barrett Carter kid, number 0, is a heck of a football player. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. They have a stupid, talented first and second level. They got a really talented front 7. The secondary has some holes in it, man. It does not look great. It does not. I was very – because, look, I know – look, you lost Andrew Booth. You lost number 31 from last year, whose name's escaping me, the other corner who's a pretty good football player. You lost Nolan Turner, who was there for 27 years.
Right.
You lost a lot of guys. So it's – but we've also seen in the past – Clemson would lose a couple guys, and then it's just the next guy's up, Darian Kent. Oh, wow, you lost AJ Terrell. Oh, Darian Kendrick's got to play. Okay, all right, cool, type of thing. But they do not look great in the secondary right now, man. They got a little bit of an issue out there right now.
From a depth standpoint, they're young. A couple of freshmen back there, and you saw, a couple of freshmen panic in certain situations. and get some pass interference calls. Venables, he's still there leading the way in the secondary, but really didn't have
They always have a white safety wearing number 24, which is hysterical. Yeah, it's so funny.
but really didn't have that great of a game. So, they lose Brent Venables. Like,
Yes.
maybe that's the area that suffers from his departure, because the front seven is as talented as any defense in the nation. But I was just shocked that Sam Hartman and that offensive line in front of him gave him enough time to be able to do the damage that he did, because they played really well. They held up quite nicely, much better than I thought they would against the front seven of Clemson.
Yeah, no, I think that said really well. And I would put this out there too, Sean. One thing that I think was the biggest difference between Venables and what I've seen so far for Wes Goodwin is I don't think they're as aggressive on the second level as they have been, right? Like they would manufacture some blitzes. They would bring these crazy pressure packages and they would get after the quarterback and they would destroy that slow mesh, the elongated mesh of Wake Forest. Yeah. It didn't seem like super aggressive, which I think hurt them a little bit in this game. So it's interesting to see as we kind of move forward as far as what Clemson does defensively. Their offense looked pretty good, but again, I don't think Wake's defense is the best in the world, if we're being completely honest. Like they're not the best either. But yeah, happy for DJ though that he's playing better football than he did last year because he looked terrible last year. So good for him.
He took a lot of ridicule.
He did. And I honestly I put this on Twitter, man, and I'll say it in here. Why not? Like, I don't care. You guys are family, right? Is there a more overrated coach in college football right now than Tony Elliott? My God, Sean. Dude, he makes DJ look unplayable. And again, I don't think DJ is great, but he's definitely better than he was last year by a mile, right? Like night and day. But he went to Virginia with that passing offense that they had last year with Brendan Armstrong and bringing back every receiver. Katon Thompson coming back. Dontavian Wicks coming back, Billy Kemp coming back, Lavelle Davis coming back from injury who didn't even play last year, and their offense is all of a sudden terrible. How did that happen? Oh, I know how it happened. Tony Elliott. That's how it happened. It's not hard to figure out. The last couple offenses that Tony Elliott's been a part of, they've been terrible. So he went to Virginia and he has destroyed that offense, man. They literally went from a very good passing offense to terrible in one offseason. How did that happen? What's the common denominator, Sean? Tony Elliott, man.
He had the quarterback. He had the wide receivers returning.
Yeah.
And it's still like, what's going on? Like, why does Brendan Armstrong look totally different? Like this is not the quarterback we saw the first 7 games of the 2020 season, 2021 season. But hey, like you said, he's the common thread, man.
He is, man. Like again, I'm not trying to throw shade at. Well, I am. I'm trying to.
Yes, you are.
I don't care. He's not a great offensive coach. He's just not. Maybe he'll do well at Virginia as the CEO, but like he's not an offensive guy. Like he's just not. So we've seen it. Ohio State dominates Wisconsin, Sean. I don't want to talk about this one too much because Archer's in here and he's going to get too happy. So I don't want to make Archer too happy in here. But that was never a game, right? Like, I mean, I honestly turned it off when it was like 21-0 or 28-0, whatever the heck it was. I'm like, Wisconsin doesn't have the firepower to come back. Like CJ was on his game. They just were out athleting Wisconsin everywhere, man. Like they just couldn't cover them. So, Ohio State continues to impress and they just dismantled Wisconsin this past weekend.
It's amazing how the wide receivers for Ohio State look better and better the further they get away from the defensive backfield of Notre Dame. That's all I'm saying. They look fantastic. The further they get away from week 1, they look better and better.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I know. And that's a subtle little clap for Notre Dame secondary, which I love. But Sean, I mean, honestly, man, as soon as they went down multiple scores, Wisconsin speaking, I was like, all right, do I think Graham Mertz is going to bring him back? Be serious, sir. Be serious.
That, like, when Graham Mertz was running on the field, like completing 70% of his passes, I'm like, this dude is the biggest fraud in the Big Ten at quarterback. And there are a lot of frauds at that quarterback position in the Big Ten, especially in the Western Division of the Big Ten. But he's one of the worst. He's one of the worst. I'm glad they sent Jack Cohn our way because of that dude.
Oh man.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, Graham Mertz. I remember he started his season out. Wasn't it against Illinois 2 years ago where he actually looked pretty good, and then it
Yeah, he
went
broke records.
downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, it's
that's
during the
funny.
COVID season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That doesn't count. Nothing
He
that
won't.
happened during the COVID season matters.
I feel pretty confident that he won't do that to Illinois this year.
Illinois got some dudes in the secondary, man. I'll tell you
Yes,
what.
sir.
Devin Witherspoon, Sidney Brown, the other corner's a pretty good football player too. So
Yeah.
I feel you, brother. I feel you. I mean, keep telling you, man. When you get that quarterback position figured out, Illinois is gonna be an all right little team, man. I'm telling you, when you get it figured out, Tommy DeVito is not the answer though. But
Hey, guy, what are you saying there? You don't like DeVito there?
Man, I've been following Tommy for a little bit, man. He's a New Jersey guy, went to Syracuse, wanted to like him. It's just,
I'm like,
he's a replaceable guy. I would just put Isaiah Williams at quarterback.
At quarterback again?
Just let him ride. Just let him ride, man. Yeah. Next game. This was a fun one. A lot of really interesting games and a couple upsets this weekend. This was one of the biggest ones. Kansas State upsetted Oklahoma, Sean, 41-34. Will not lie. I didn't buy into Oklahoma because it's not like I thought they were like, top 5 team, maybe playoff contender type of thing, right? But Brent Venables, I thought, had that defense playing pretty well the first couple games. It's not the best competition, but like it just looked faster on the defensive side of the ball. I'm like, cool. Yeah. And then Dylan Gabriel actually played a pretty good game in this game overall. I think for 300-something yards, 4 touchdowns, I think, ran for 60-something and only 7 carries. Like Dylan Gabriel had a good game. Eric Gray ran well in this game as well. But the defense collapsed against Kansas State, man. They couldn't stop the run. I mean, Deuce Vaughn, who is a baller, by the way, Kansas State's running back, ran for over 100 yards. Adrian Martinez had 140 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. Sean, it seems, although I think it's trending in the right direction defensively with Brent Venables, it's going to get better. It was not good in this game against Kansas State, man. They could not stop the run all day. Just couldn't do it.
That's a lot of things from a coaching standpoint that you can come in and mask with the talent that you have or that was left there for you. Mm-hmm. And, a popular national TV host, who just happens to like holding the jugglers of USC on a weekly basis, pointed out that, it's funny how the coach left for Oklahoma and he's still winless. And, Venables comes to Oklahoma and he's 3-1. And, I'm glad someone pushed back. I think it was David Pollack pushed back and said, don't forget that they took his quarterback and his best wide receiver with him. Like, let's not act like he came in with, the same amount of talent. And even though it was a close game, like you said, I think Venables is trying to insert his culture. But ultimately, when the pressure, when the pressure gets to you, players become who they are.
Yep.
Right. And that roster went back to the Oklahoma defense of the past 2 seasons, when they got into a tough game. So I don't think that's shocking. I think they're going to show improvement defensively, but it's a difference between playing Nebraska and Kansas State. You talk about Adrian Martinez, but I'll say this. If you really go back and watch this series over the last 3 seasons, Kansas State walked into Norman 2 years ago and stayed in the game.
They're very for whatever reason, man. Kansas State
very
has
confident
against
Oklahoma. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's just a matchup where, where you walk in and like, okay, we know we're better than these guys, but every year this game turns into a brawl. And it just happened to turn into a high-scoring brawl.
Yep.
But nevertheless, Kansas State was physical. They punched them in the mouth, and they stayed with it. They didn't take their foot off their necks. And like I said, Dylan Gabriel had a fantastic game. And it took every bit of offense from Kansas State to be able to pull out that win on the road.
100%. Yeah, and I thought Oklahoma was going to get it done because Kansas State just had lost a kind of an underwhelming football game the week before, man. You're kind of
Yeah,
like, huh.
yeah, yeah,
I'll say this, though. What they got cooking in Kansas right now, man. Kansas State and Kansas, right? Like Kansas just had a big win over Duke.
yeah,
They came to Kansas and they won. I think the final was 34-27, somewhere in that
yeah.
ballpark. Tell you what, man, Jalen Daniels could play a little football, the quarterback from Kansas, man. He's a pretty good football player. So hats
Yes, he
off
is.
to Lance Leopold and the Kansas program. I mean, that's the best start they've had since 2009 when they had Todd Reesing still playing quarterback for Kansas, which I
Yeah,
loved. I loved Todd Reesing, by the way. He's one of my favorite non-Notre Dame players of all time. I loved him in that Mark Mangino era with Keith Talib and all
Keith
those
Talib and
dudes.
all of that guys. Yeah,
Oh
yeah, yeah.
yeah, man. Oh yeah, they were a good football team. But I mean, Sean, big moment for Kansas, man. I'm really happy for them and Lance Leopold.
No, Lance Leopold is doing a fantastic job. I just don't want him to fall for the banana in the tailpipe.
What,
That's all.
Nebraska?
Yeah. Do not fall for the banana. Like, wait, let your agent do his job. Be patient. You're going to find a good job. He deserves it. He really does.
Yeah, man, he's done a tremendous job, and you shouldn't be surprised seeing what he's done at he was at North Dakota State, when he went to
State.
Buffalo, when he
Yeah.
went to Kansas. Now, like
Yeah.
he's built programs.
Yeah.
Actually, not. I was going to say slowly but surely, but this is only his second year at Kansas, right? So it hasn't been
Yeah.
that slow. I mean,
Yeah.
he's done it pretty good stuff, man. And real quick, when we get to the last game we want to talk about, how about Michigan State getting absolutely pummeled by Minnesota? What was that 34-7? Minnesota dominated that football game. And Minnesota, Sean, was without Chris Altman-Bell, who's their best wide receiver by a landslide. But Minnesota, man, playing good football. But I think more than anything, I actually called this one before the season too. I don't like to pat myself on the back too much, but I did call the Michigan State regression a little bit, and they are not looking very good this season.
I just don't understand their inability to get players in the secondary.
Yeah,
Like,
man.
what is going on? And then the regression of Peyton Thorne and that offense. And, they have some nice young guys at running back. But, of course, when you lose a Heisman-type running back, look, man, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle for Michigan State this year. It really is. I thought that offense would be able to overcome some struggles defensively. But once that offense started coming back to the pack, yeah, Mel Tucker, I don't know. He's getting squeezed because he's in between a surging Michigan program
Yes.
and a surging Notre Dame program.
Yep.
And that's a tough place to be, Mel Tucker. Like, if you're not going to get it done, like, between last year and this year, I don't know what it's looking like for the next 2 years when it comes to recruiting, and unless you get some transfers in. Like, he was able to get in impact transfer in last year, but I don't know how often you can do that.
That's why I didn't think it was. That's why I didn't think it was sustainable, Sean. Is the fact that, like, yeah, man, he went out and he hit the transfer portal as much as anyone. I think besides Western Kentucky last season, he was the most active as far as in the transfer portal was Michigan State. And, like, yeah, it worked. It's like a free agency, right? Like, every once in a while you hit perfect on free agency. Like, I remember the Philadelphia Eagles killed before the 2017 season. Like, they got Chris Long and, like, all these dudes, and you're like, every move they made that offseason, you're like, that was a hit. That was a hit. That was a hit. And same thing for Michigan State last year. It's like, okay, Kenneth Walker, Jalen Reed, like, you just kind of cross off the list, and you're like, they hit the bank last year. But the problem is if you keep doing that philosophy, you're not going to hit every year, right? No. Like, it's a quick fix. It's not a long-term sustainable thing, right? Yeah. So I do think that they are recruiting better from a high school perspective, but I think that people kind of underestimate the fact that, like, it's probably not super sustainable short term for Michigan State. They're going to have to coach up some of the younger guys that are coming in now.
You don't want to become that transfer school, not in a big time conference like that. Like, Michigan State, even under D'Antoni, had to be a developmental school. Had to be. Recruit, develop, toughness, win in the trenches, have some good defensive backs, and just have a good, sound quarterback that doesn't make mistakes in a run game. Like, that was the foundation. And you thought Mel Tucker was going to come in and kind of continue that. based
Yep.
upon the success with Kenneth Walker. But he doesn't have he doesn't have like historically what you've had with Denard and all of those runs of great defensive backs, Trey Waynes that they had. They haven't been able to find those guys. So,
Sean, you know what's funny? Me and Brian always clown on the PFF grading system sometimes, right? And I was on there this morning just looking at some of these grades. There is a safety from Michigan State that is ranked in like the top 5 safeties in college football. I was looking at it, man. I wanted to bring this up real quick because I'm not going to say the player's name because I'm not going to try to dog on him. But I'm like, how the heck? He's like the 10th ranked safety in college football, according to this, out of Michigan State. I'm like, there is not a single top rated player in that secondary right now, man. Michigan State
Notre Dame's entire safety rotation is probably better than anybody they have at safety.
Yeah. It's brother, it's not great. It's not great in Michigan State. Last game that I wanted to hit on, though, last one that has some Notre Dame relevance. USC narrowly defeated Oregon State 17-14. Now, I didn't see this one live because it was a little late for me, but I actually did see the replay of this game, so I was able to watch in on this one. Sean, I mean, for me, man, I got two things from this game, right? Two things, actually 3 things, right? USC won an ugly game, so like good for them, right? Like that's a good step because like you've seen them explode offensively, right, and win that brand of football. You haven't seen a 17-14 win yet. Though, right? So you saw an ugly victory from USC. You also saw for the first game this year where USC played a legit good defense that they struggled a little bit offensively. And number 3 you saw is, man, Chance Nolan had a bad game for Oregon State, man. Did he 4 interceptions or was it 3? I think it was 4 interceptions during that football game, and they still had a chance to win. So I'm halfway like, okay, USC won a game that they don't usually win, but then also USC maybe you need to pump the brakes just slightly on USC. Like they're probably not the top 7 team in the country like people think they are right now, right? They're a good football team, but I think that we might need to just pump the brakes slightly on USC. But hats off to them for winning an ugly game against Oregon State.
Yeah, a Beaver team that struggled in the running game was able to go and put up 153 yards. And I don't care what anybody says. When they get to Utah and when they get to the more physical teams, UCLA the last 2 years has been more of a rushing team, even though Chip Kelly wants to insert his system. When they get to physical teams that can run the ball, this is when the depth and the attrition, because I believe they lost a defensive lineman to injury against Oregon State that might be out for a while. So by the end of the year, when Notre Dame faces them, for me, especially if Notre Dame continues the trend and the identity that they're on the path to, that's going to be a tough game for USC. Like, because most people would think like, that offense is going to be a challenge to Notre Dame. That offense goes right into the hands of the strength of Notre Dame defensively.
Yep.
So I'm sure Notre Dame is going to be able to hold them down, but can that front 4 and linebackers of USC hold up against this Russian attack and this offensive line? So that's what stood out to me, is that Oregon State was going to be the first test, and even more than, like you said, Nolan not having his best game, 4th and 6 at midfield, and you allow Caleb Williams to kind of make a play there.
Oh, man.
But that throw to Addison, that was a dime. Right in between the cover 2, that was a dime. That was a dime. The safety was right there too. Like,
well, I think Arch said it in a comment before, Sean. Sorry to cut you off, but he said if that safety breaks for Addison 1 step sooner, Addison doesn't get that. But probably right, Arch. I mean, it was just like it was. That's why the game. It's a game of inches, man. Like it truly is, man.
Yeah.
But to your point, Sean, Caleb Williams is the real deal, man. He's a very talented player.
No. Notre Dame fans were telling me last year that he wasn't that much better than a certain quarterback on our roster. No, he just happens to be with Lincoln Riley. That's all. I'm like, okay, all right.
I think anyone would. I think anybody would take Caleb Williams right now, but it's just my opinion there. But yes, Sean, any other games you wanted to hit on real quick, or you good?
It was
Any
just
other thoughts?
a weird weekend. Like Kent
Yeah.
State giving Georgia a
Oh
game.
my, that was the weirdest game ever, man.
Yes,
That was so
yes,
strange. Was it
yes.
39-22 was the final, I think, right?
39-22. They pretty much took over late in that game. But Brock Bowers and his jet sweep for 75 yards for a touchdown. Tommy Reeves was watching in the locker room and just had to get Michael Mayer a jet sweep, against North Carolina. You know what else was weird? Thomas Hammock and the great job he continues to do in Northern Illinois. And they go into Kentucky and compete. Kentucky pulls away late, but just seeing these MAC schools, man, really compete and going on the road against these Power 5 conferences and showing well. And then Tennessee and Florida coming down to the wire, and Hendon Hooker continuing to develop.
Good football player, man.
Man, he has become a professional football player at the position.
He's a really good player. Really good player.
And, Josh Heupel's done a really, really good job. And they didn't have Tillman was out, right?
Yeah. Yep. Cedric Tillman. Tillman was out. Yep. Who's easily the best receiver, like really good football player. He was out. Shout out to Northern Illinois, though, Sean. I think their quarterback was out too, right? Rocky Lombardi, I think, was out during that football game. So, yeah, that was a good performance. I mean, like you said, though, Hendon Hooker was balling, man. Like, played a really good game against Florida without his best receiver. I still like to think back to Virginia Tech when Justin Fuente was playing Quincy Patterson over him, who went to North Dakota State and was a backup quarterback for North Dakota State, and Braxton Burmeister, who's now at San Diego State and is terrible. But let's keep messing around and put Hendon on the field sometimes, off the field. I just didn't get that one. Did not get it, but. Shout out to Hendon Hooker, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. So that's going to be the end to the college football round talk. We're about college football roundtable, where we talk a little bit of college football and the landscape of this past week. That was week 4 in college football. Next, we're going to get into the mailbag here in a second. Again, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, 5-star reviews if you're listening to on your favorite podcast platform. Let's get into some mailbag. All right, Sean, I'm going to bring up a couple of these super chats first. Want to bring, let's go to Demetrius Rex first, who's Sean. His question was, can you guys talk 2023 quarterback recruiting? We get this question every week, Demetrius, and I'll answer it every week too. I'm just kind of stating the obvious, obviously, because it's the most important position in sports. We don't have a massive update, man. Like, there's just not a massive update here, right? There's 2 things that need to happen. One, is CJ Carr going to reclassify, or is he going to stay in 2024? That's the first question that needs to be answered, right? If the answer is that he'll stay in 2024, then there are a couple quarterbacks that Notre Dame is trying to get in on. But again, it's a season process right now, right? Yeah. Like, it's not something where this is going to get figured out this week, next week, not this month, definitely. Like, this is something that's going to have to happen over the next couple months, as far as maybe getting an Avery Johnson to campus, maybe getting a Kenny Minchie to campus, maybe getting in on a different quarterback that might be committed to a different school, maybe a lower level school. I don't know. Fact of the matter is I remain consistent with this. I'm going to be consistent until I don't believe this anymore. But I think Notre Dame's going to get a 2023 quarterback recruit, whether that is CJ Carr or somebody else. But there's no massive update right now. The truth of the matter is that we don't know who the 2023 quarterback is going to be. And honestly, I don't think the staff knows either, quite certainly right now, right? Like, they're still trying to figure this out as well. So,
yep, I concur. Nothing to add. You hit it right on the head. Hit the nail right on the head.
Yep, that's it, man. It's something that's just going to have to be worked out a little bit, and we do not know what the answers are as of right now. And again, this is a recruiting podcast. We're in the mailbag, so if you want to throw recruiting questions in, feel free. If you want to throw in team-related questions, feel free. If you want to ask Sean his favorite sub shop in the in the city of Chicago, feel free. Anything you want to ask, we are here to answer your questions. Going to go to another I know we had another super chat down here. Yep, from Jacob Snyder. Refs were on a power trip. Changed my mind. Jacob, if you could put in the chat real quick, is this referring to? I'm assuming they were talking about the Notre Dame game, right? I would guess. Sean,
a lot of people are still upset about. Look, man.
Mm-hmm.
This might sound. I make sure this doesn't come across the wrong way. Look.
Yes.
I'm not here to debate whether or not it was targeting. I just don't mind. I think that's about as best as I can say it. If it assures that I get to see a little bit more of Prince Collie early on against BYU, I'm here to watch. That's it. I think the refs. I think Mac Brown had a reason to get that 15-yard penalty because I would have been ticked off on that 4th and goal call. That pass.
I would have either. That was a bang play. Could have went either way. I would have been pissed off too if I would have been ticked.
I'd have been ticked off if I'm Mac Brown. So I mean, the refs didn't have the best of days down in Chapel Hill, but I'm assuming he's talking about the targeting call.
That's most likely what he's talking about. Most likely, yeah. But I'm the same way, man. Like, do I think that it should have been a target ejection? No, I don't think he should have been ejected for it. But at the end of the day, it happens. We have to move on, right? It's just is what it is. I'm not going to have sour grapes the whole week just because it was maybe a questionable call. But like Sean said, though, there were a couple calls that did not maybe go on Notre Dame or went in Notre Dame's favor that were also questionable calls, right? Yeah. Like look, I'm a former player. I'm a former coach. I don't like referees. I mean, they're awful, man. What do you want me to say about it? Like, they're not good. Every week it's bad. Sometimes it's one-sided where it's super unfair. Sometimes it's all the way around. The one thing I'll say about the refs, though, from this past weekend, Sean, in my opinion, they were bad, but they were consistently bad. Like, they made bad calls for both sides, in my opinion. So,
what's the worst thing you ever said to a ref?
To his face or behind his back?
That's the response I was looking for.
Look, man, I would never shy away from this. I was not the nicest person on the football field. We'll just leave it at that. All right. I can't say some of the words that it would describe who I was as a football player. I was not a nice man on the football field. So, but I was always pretty nice to refs, man, because ultimately they control the football game, if we're being completely honest, right? So, like, I was respectful, but behind scenes, I had some choice words at times. But it's We'll go to another super chat. Thank you from Will ND. Hey, Ryan and Sean, can we flip any Miami commits after the loss to Middle Tennessee State? Will, I don't know directly. Like, I don't even know who Notre Dame is on that's even committed to Miami right now, if I'm being completely honest with you, right? I'll say this, though. As teams start having struggles, Notre Dame would be wise to test the waters if there's a guy that makes sense, right? If there's a player that they like, I would be on the phone right now and making calls to some kids. Like, we've already had a couple coaches fired. We already had some teams get upset. I would be on the phone with some kids for sure. I don't know if there's anybody that's specifically on the radar for Notre Dame, but I'm always checking my options, man. And those types of people use people. You don't think that other teams have used Notre Dame losing to Marshall as kind of negative recruiting on them? Absolutely have. So Notre Dame can do the same thing, right? Miami just lost to Middle Tennessee State, who's also worse than Marshall, by the way. They're a bad football team. But so if Notre Dame wants to use that, they should be able to. It's point blank to it. So, that's all.
I would say the only person I would think of would be a Jaden Rashada at quarterback if it continues to go the way it's going.
Yeah.
But I like their offensive staff, so I just don't really.
And it's the same thing with Notre Dame right now too, Sean. Like, it's a first-year staff. There's going to be some
defections. Yeah.
It's just There's context to everything. So not directly Will, but again, I would, if I was Notre Dame, I'd be constantly doing my homework for some teams that are struggling, or if coaching changes happen, like all those types of things. Yeah, I would always have my options open. And thank you again for the super chat. Rob Osgood says, question: I hope with this past game, It faves. I'm sorry. Jeremiah Love. It favors Jeremiah Love the chance to. I'm sorry. It gave Jeremiah Love the chance to see what can be done with the running backs. Also, that needs to be done to show the wide receiver recruits the future of their wide receiver play. Rob, I completely agree. And Sean, I'll kick this over to you in a second, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a huge thing. Like Jeremiah Love was on campus the Marshall game where Notre Dame was not able to run the football very well, right? And they haven't been able to run the football very well all season. And the fact that he got to see 3 Notre Dame running backs go over 100 total yards, score a touchdown each this past weekend against North Carolina, I think it shows growth. I think it shows potential. And now I think he can visualize more like, oh, that's what I can do in that offense, right? Like I know I'm a good football player already, but how can I fit and how can they accentuate my strengths? I think it was big for the North Carolina game to show Jeremiah Love just how good he can be.
On top of that, I think the performance of Logan Diggs is something he can like laser in on and say, yo, that's how I see myself in that offense. I can see myself being the guy on the wheel route coming out of the backfield, the arrow route coming out of the backfield, and still being able to run the ball outside, inside. It's very interesting. I think in a sense, you watched the film. Did you see a combination of zone blocking mixed in with downhill blocking from Notre Dame?
I saw so there was a lot of inside zone.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of duo. So for people that don't know too much about duo's basically inside zone, but the running back step changes, so he gets more downhill than kind of on an angle, right? So that's a little more of a downhill style run. I think there was some gap scheme where there was some pulls at some point, but most part, I think that the majority of was a zone duo type of scheme. But yeah, Sean, I do think they mixed in some power type of stuff as well.
Yeah, I thought they did as well. I think that power, man, when you get Estime running downhill and that power,
doesn't Estime just look like a future Pittsburgh Steeler running back? That's just what he is, man.
Man, we call him, he's the mini bus. I don't know if there's such thing as a mini bus, but he is Bus Junior.
Call him a caravan, man. Something like, yeah, he's that, brother. He is, yeah. I posted some clips on my Twitter, so I don't know if you saw it, but like, man, when he gets downhill, literally, and I don't think this is exaggeration. There's probably not 5 players in college football that I would rather not tackle than Audric Estime, man. Like he is a runaway freight train. He really is. Like it's the one safety that came up and like actually came up with pretty good force and came to balance pretty well. Estime ran him clean over, man. Like it's just he's a freight train, man. Absolute freight train.
The safeties are starting to look like the safeties and defensive backs are starting to look like basketball players that are terrible at taking charges. You know how they start falling back before contact? Like that's some of these defensive backs. Like he's not even hitting them and they're just starting to fall. Like let me take away some of this impact right now.
Yep.
And at least it'll look like I stayed in front of him a little bit. But yeah.
Yep. And Darius just asked, Estime is just a true freshman. Darius, he's a redshirt freshman, so he's a second-year player. But he barely played as a freshman. I think he had like 7 carries for 60 yards or something like that as a freshman. So he only played in 1 football game, I think I remember. So
2.
Yeah. Did he play 2?
Maybe. And he got a couple of snaps in the Fiesta Bowl.
Good call. Yep. So played very little last year, so he's still a freshman eligibility, but he's a sophomore on the roster. So nice question. Oh, I did want to bring that back up, I think, because Rob, I think we didn't answer the second part to this question. So wide receivers. Lorenzo Styles looked a lot better this game, got a touchdown. They used him in a variety of ways. I think that you need to see more upside, like more cohesiveness as a wide receiver room, right? Like you need to see more guys start to step up. But I think it was a step in the right direction, Rob. Like I think they played better than they have been, but for it to really like catapult to like the next level where you're like, wide receivers just want to come play for Notre Dame, it needs to be more consistent. It needs to be more widespread as far as what the impact is. But yeah, I think it was a step in the right direction. Sean, I don't know if you agree with that, but I think it was a step in the right direction.
Well, I mean, it is a step in the right direction. And this is what you want to see, right? You know what you are. You know what your identity is. But even in that was the same identity that Nick Saban had when he went and got Julio Jones, who started the trend for wide receivers at Alabama. So As a fan base, you can't get stuck in what the identity of the offense is. You just need that one guy to start the trend. And it could be a guy that's on the roster right now when he gets the opportunity. It could be one of the 3 guys we already have signed in the 23 class when they come. But somebody has to be that guy that starts the trend, that starts to attract the eyes of wide receivers. Because you can be a great wide receiver and just in multiple systems, like multiple systems. So, you don't necessarily just have to go like full 4 wide all day in order to showcase the wide receiver position. So.
Oh no! Someone called him Audric the short bus estimate. Look what you did, Sean. This is your fault. This is your fault.
I don't think I want. There's so many things that come with that short bus statement. I don't.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't know if I want that.
Yeah, we'll stay away from that one. David Lowe said Irish opening up at 9.5-point favorites against BYU. Wanted to bring this one up, Sean, because it's not a question from David. It was just kind of pointing out the initial line. 9.5 sounds high to me, man. Like, I don't know. It's just a little high to me.
Oh, it's very high. Very high. I think MGM had it at like 6.5, and FanDuel has it at like 7 right now. So that's more realistic to me.
It's a bit of a difference in lines from your different sports books. That's interesting.
Oh, heck yeah. Bit of a difference. But honestly, I'll be honest. If Notre Dame shows up, one of the games I watched a little bit of was BYU against Wyoming, and I just came away like, they won because they had the better quarterback, but Wyoming competed. And if Notre Dame actually is trending and getting better week to week, game to game, it might end up being tough for the Cougars.
Yeah. I watched the coaches film, and I know we were talking about this before the podcast, Sean. Like, I watched BYU though, man. Defensively, they didn't look that great against Wyoming, man. I don't know what it was. It did not look good. It was
no. When Oregon pushes you around, it's like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah, and I know. So BYU offensively has been out a couple of their top receivers, but Jared Hall is a pretty good football player, and we'll see who's back healthy. But yeah, defensively was not as impressive as I didn't think it was going to be impressive, but I thought it was going to be solid, good football. You know what I mean? Like, and I just didn't look like they were ready to play that Wyoming game for some reason. But regardless, we're going to move on here to Wicked Bronco Productions. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it. Said, hey guys, so any updates on Bowen and any guys who might be wavering on their commitments? Also, I know the AP poll doesn't matter, but the fact UNC, North Carolina, has 9 votes and Notre Dame has none is BS. I'm going to say BS because I don't know if I can say that word on the podcast. So, Sean, first part, look, we've talked about Peyton Bowen a ton. Is there an update? No, there's not an update really. He's still taking visits. He continues to say the right things as far as his commitment to Notre Dame. I don't know what the end all be all is going to be. I'm not going to be surprised if he ends up in the class. I'm not going to be surprised if he ends up not in the class. I truly do not know, folks. Like, I'm going to be completely honest about it, right? Like, he says all the right things. All the right things. He's consistent with his contact with his other commits in the class, plays video games with them. He's constantly talking with them. Everything seems fine on the surface. And then he's going on visits still. So until Peyton says, like, I'm done taking visits, I don't care. Like, I'm just not going to feel 100% about it. But that being said, like, this hasn't been, like, super inconsistent behavior for Peyton. Like, this is what he's been doing since he committed to Notre Dame. So it's not necessarily like a panic button at all. But, I mean, if you ask me, is he going to be in the class? I truly don't know. I truly don't know. I think that it's still more likely he ends up in the class than he doesn't. But, Sean, like, this is one of those ones where, like, it's hard to get a read on, man, because his actions are something different than his words. You know what I mean? So, like, that's just all. I can't make much of it.
Let's have some context, right? Yep. Like, where Denton is very close to the Oklahoma campus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, last week, we had to answer a question about Brandon Davis Swain, being seen at a Michigan game when he didn't go there, like, for a recruiting trip. He went with the rest of his teammates, and he was there. I mean, he lives less than 100 miles from Michigan. He could end up at a Michigan State game. Heck, Texas and Oklahoma's coming up. Peyton Bowen could end up at that game. It's like things are going to happen. And until there's
and there, I'll say that. Sorry to cut you off, Sean. Then you continue. But like also to your point, I'm just kind of adding on to your point.
yeah.
Some of these visits are because Peyton's going with Eli, right? Like it's not necessarily a Peyton recruiting visit, but like to your point, like there is some context to consider.
And their mother and family, they were open up front that, hey, Peyton's going on Eli's visits and Eli will be going on Peyton's visits. So if Eli has visits, Peyton's going to be there. And, don't overreact. Like we said, until we hear or see anything different, until we see different activity as far as his relationships with the recruits in the class, that might make us feel a certain way.
Yep.
But the fact that any and everybody is still coming after him, he's the belle of the ball at the position. Like
if
who wouldn't?
If Notre Dame keeps winning football games and they end the season the right way, I don't think we have to worry about this one. But that's also on the other side of it, Sean, though. But like if Notre Dame collapses and they go 6-6 this year, I'm not necessarily that you have to worry about Peyton Bowen. What I'm saying is that winning solves everything at the end of the day, right? Like that's just kind of what I'm saying there. So yeah. So we've spent a lot of time on that one. Second part to the question, wavering on commitments. No, I mean, honestly, Wicked Bronco Productions, like the only player that we've heard consistently about, like, is he on decommitment watch is Peyton Bowen, right? But like, again, we haven't heard anything that would say like it's going to happen type of thing, right? But also it's the world of recruiting. Like I never would have thought Elijah Page was going to decommit. Just wouldn't have. I wouldn't have. There was no reason to think that. There was zero reason to think it.
Because we haven't done a show since he decommitted. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, me and Brian talked about it, Sean. It's just like, look, distance was the thing that he talked about, which I think there's some validity to, but also I think it's, I think that Notre Dame getting off to a rough start doesn't help anything, right? USC has the perspective of like, hey, if you come to USC, you might have a shot to start year one. Like you have a good possibility. You have an opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. If you go to Notre Dame, you got to sit behind Alton Fisher for at least a year, at least, right? So that's the outlook, man. But like, but I say that to say this is that I would not have picked Elijah Page as a decommitment candidate, and he decommitted, right? So I'm not going to say that nobody is wavering. All I'm saying is nobody that I'm hearing from consistently is wavering at this point. Anyway, in my
you know what my feeling was when he decommitted?
What's that?
Don't want him to decommit,
right?
But if I had to have a decommitment, he's a West kid. It was rumors about him and USC from the jump during his recruiting. And now we're hearing that most likely that's where he's going to end up. Like if Jaden Greathouse decommits, then come talk to me. But as far as like the future, like you said, the depth in that room, offensive line, is okay. So it can survive him decommitting because they can go out and find another offensive lineman if they want to in the 23 class.
And I have a article that may be coming out either today or tomorrow, Sean, that I highlighted 4 different players that I think Notre Dame should be looking at right now as far as if they want to fill that left tackle spot in 2023. So to your point, there are other options out there, man. I will
say this.
Elijah Page is a good player. Yeah.
I will piggyback off of the sentiment that you used, won't use names, but when he did decommit, you put out some tweets about his moment being stolen. Yeah. And some of those same people were the reasons that Notre Dame didn't have 6 guys in the class at the position instead of 5. And if he had decommitted, Notre Dame would have had 5 guys still if it were not for the same individuals. But I'll leave that at that.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past. It's very unfortunate. The world of social media and clickbait articles. It's very sad, but unfortunate.
Yeah, I can't wait for that article to come out. I can't wait.
There's some interesting players. There's some interesting players that are still out there, Sean. So yeah. We had a back-to-back super chat here from Wicked Bronco Production. It said it's almost like North Carolina is getting credit for losing to Notre. Oh, we tried to answer the third part of his question, but we'll answer it on this one. It's almost like North Carolina is getting credit for losing to Notre Dame, which if Notre Dame isn't closer than UNC is being ranked at 9, people think they are a top 25 team. Should Notre Dame get credit for beating them? So, Sean, this was to his comment about 9 people voted for UNC to be a top 25 team, and Notre Dame didn't get any votes. It is ridiculous when you look at it like that. I mean, one team is 3-1, one's 2-2, but like the head-to-head matchup, I think you saw that Notre Dame is clearly a better football player than North Carolina.
And then you can kind of blame Notre Dame because the game honestly should have been something like 55-20. And most of these people don't really watch games to understand how dominant it was than 45-32. So, and then North Carolina was in the top 25. Like they were in it. And for them to drop all the way out probably would have been tough to get them all the way out of the top 25. But I agree. We said this on a post-game show. Whether you like it or not, Notre Dame is literally 8 minutes of football away from being 3-1 and probably still in the top 10.
Yep.
That's, so it's a thin line. It's a real thin line with this team, and hopefully they continue to trend upwards.
Yep. Just control what you can control, man. We'll see what happens at the ends.
Yeah.
Question from Richie Giuliano's uncle, Bill Hefner. Okay. Thank you for the super chat, first and foremost. If Notre Dame wins out, is there still a chance at a New York Six Bowl, Sean, you think?
No.
You don't think so? It's over?
No, that Marshall loss is just...
It's not great.
No. And if Marshall was continuing to win and didn't have the Bowling Green loss, then I would say, okay.
They just lost to Troy, too, man. They've lost 2 straight. Yeah.
Right, no, it's just that loss is just it gets worse each week. It gets worse.
Yeah, it wasn't great, man.
No.
I'll say this though: if Notre Dame if they win out and they beat Clemson, USC, BYU, some of those teams, I think they still have a shot. But to your point, Sean, that is a bad blemish on the record.
Well, it depends on how the conferences go, right?
Yeah.
Right. If Ohio State just like blows through the conference and goes undefeated, and Michigan loses a game on the way to Michigan State. Penn State beats Michigan, but then Penn State turns around and loses to Purdue or somebody, and they both have 2 losses.
Yep.
Then you get into Notre Dame being able to say, yo, we beat USC, we beat Clemson, we beat BYU, we beat a top 25 Syracuse team, we played Ohio State well. I mean, they would be in it. And who wouldn't want to have that fan base in the NY6 Bowl? But it's going to be tough. Because then you would have, in my opinion, a possibility of a 1-loss Minnesota team losing to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. So
yeah, got to see how things kind of play out a little bit for sure. Yeah. I'll say in a vacuum though, if Notre Dame goes 10-2 and has victories over Clemson, BYU, USC, I think they have a chance. I think they do have a chance. It's just there's context to consider about it for sure.
That Marshall loss just ticks me off, man.
I get it, man. I get it. Joseph Sergey just asked any replacement for Page. Joseph, I don't know if ultimately Notre Dame is going to try to find a 5th in the class again. I don't know, but I am putting together an article. It's already done. It just hasn't been published yet, of 4 potential players that I think Notre Dame should take long looks at the offensive tackle position. So keep a lookout for that, and might answer your question. Archer said, Ryan and Sean, what are your final records and bowl matchup predictions for Notre Dame after week 4? All right, Sean, impulse right now, real quick, okay? Without looking at the remaining schedule in front of you. Notre Dame goes blank this season, final record.
10-2.
Oh, you think they're going to win out? You think it? All right.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. we get Clemson at home. It's huge that is at home. DJ in that environment, I'll take my chances. And USC is USC to me. I'm with Cam Hart until I'm proven wrong. Like, Yeah, okay. I mean, you have studs offensively, but the trenches are real soft, my man.
Yeah.
Real soft. So until you can line up and stop us on the offensive line and in the trenches, yeah, it's going to be a problem. So it's. I'm telling you, it's a possibility that they run the table. At worst, 9-3 though.
I was gonna say 9-3. I think
Yeah,
9-3 is a good number. Yeah.
yeah.
I think if you split with USC and Clemson, I think you got a chance to go 9-3. But if they win both, then I think that the schedule is pretty favorable for Notre Dame outside of Clemson and USC, right? I mean, because I
Yeah.
think we'll have to see what happens with BYU, but like I think Notre Dame has a good chance to win that football game. And then you're talking about the Boston Colleges, UNLVs of the world, Syracuse's. Like Notre Dame should win all those football games. Should
Boston,
again on
Boston
paper.
College is
I have to see it.
awful.
They're
Boston College is awful. They're-
they're it's such a bad combination, man, because you know that Phil Dracovic is a hold the ball a little long type of
yes,
quarterback and hit some
yes,
deep passes, that type of dude, and their offensive line is terrible. It is just a bad
really
combination
bad.
right now.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
great.
I agree.
Not great. Wicked Bronco Productions again, Sean. Another super chat. Thank you so much, sir. Sorry for blowing you guys up. Oh, keep blowing us up.
Keep
But I
going
think we
up.
honestly, yeah, for real, we appreciate you. But I honestly think we can go 10-2 and win a New Year's Six game. Clemson, BYU, USC, and Syracuse have all shown flaws, and I think Notre Dame will only get better. People got to get over Marshall. Texas A&M also lost to App State.
No, you can't. That last part, get over Marshall. No.
I mean, honestly, like
No.
I'll put it like this: Wicked Bronco Productions, and thank you again for the super chat. We appreciate it. If Notre Dame if they run the table and they get to a nice bowl game and they win, whatever, I'll look back on the season and say, okay, I can work with that, right? Like they redempted themselves. Redempted, is that a word? They
redeemed themselves,
redeemed themselves.
which
I'm
means
an
they
idiot.
got back to like level
Yes.
ground with you. That's basically what you're saying.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know why the word redeemed was not in my head. I apologize. I was thinking of a redemptive character, but yeah,
Right.
okay. So they redeemed themselves, and then you can kind of look past the Marshall game a little bit. But to Sean's point, that game's unforgivable, man. Like you can't lose to Marshall. You're Notre Dame. You can't lose to Marshall. That's point blank to it. You know, it's like
unforgivable.
It's like when they lost to Tulsa. I mean, we still talk about that Tulsa game years and years later, Sean. Like, it's unforgivable, man. Like, it can't happen. It just can't happen. No matter how bad you are at Notre Dame, if you are the worst Notre Dame team we've seen in X amount of years, you can't lose to Marshall.
Yeah.
You can't. It's point blank. It's like if they would have lost to Ball State a few years ago, we'd still be talking about Ball State too. Like if they would have lost to Toledo last year, we'd still be talking about Toledo. You can't lose to that team. You're Notre Dame. You can't lose to that. I mean, just point blank to it.
And don't bring up Texas A&M. They're not, dude. Don't compare Notre Dame.
They're not the standard. They're not the standard. Yeah.
It's like Texas A&M continually loses games like that every year under Jimbo Fisher.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 7-5, 8-4 coach. That's who he is.
Man, it's I mean, just to the point, man, it is unforgivable. It's like years from now, when we talk about when I was in attendance in the Marshall game and they lost to Marshall, like it, and that could even come like if Marcus Freeman wins a national championship next year, I'm still going to talk about the Marshall game because it's inexcusable. You're still going to talk about it. You are
like, yo, I agree with you. They can run the table, and if they run the table, that means they've gotten to a certain point as a team. So they definitely could win an NY6 game if they were in it. But that the fact that they would run the table points to how unforgivable that Marshall game is. It literally points to it. Like if you were this good,
Sean, if they win, if they've run the table, then that means Marshall is the reason you're not playing in the playoffs most likely.
Absolutely. And I'm furious. I'm even more furious then. Are you kidding me? Like 8 minutes of football?
Like, Sean, honestly, if Notre Dame would have went 10-2 this year and their 2 losses were to Ohio State and Clemson, let's say, it would have been like, damn, man, like that stinks. But at least you lost to 2 good football teams, right?
Right.
If Marshall was the reason that you didn't make a playoff run, like, wow, man. Wow. That's rough. I mean, yeah. Yep. All right, moving on, though. We had another super chat. A lot of great super chats today. A lot of great questions today, just in general. Dan O'Malley said, thank you, Dan, for the super chat. Will the trend to test optional make it any easier for us to get some recruits that have decent grades but don't test well, or is that overstated? Is that a thing now? I mean, honestly, Dan, I'm sorry, Don O'Malley. That's my apologies, Don. I apologize for that. So, Don, I'm genuinely asking this, okay? Because I am no longer
with the kids with the test like ACT and SAT.
That's optional now?
Yeah,
I'm
because of COVID.
genuinely asking.
Yeah, because of COVID, it's optional.
Really?
Yeah.
So hey, I was an educator for a few years, but I was on the middle school level, so I wasn't even a high school teacher or anything, right?
Yeah.
Well, I had no idea that was optional now, those bigger tests. When I was in school, it definitely wasn't optional.
It's almost like saying you don't have to take it, but if you're trying to get into the top schools, we recommend that you do take it. And my daughter, she graduated in 20, so her year was the last year where it was mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
After that COVID year, they made it optional, and a lot of kids man. But most kids that are serious about college are still taking the test. So I haven't seen a downtick in people that are looking to avoid either one of the tests. So, but I don't see how it impacts, because it's still going to be as competitive. Once again, a school like Notre Dame, highly competitive to get into.
And I was going to say, yeah, because the Spanky just and the Spanky just said that he thinks Notre Dame is still going to be a requirement. I don't know that, to be honest. Like, I'm assuming they are because they're so high academic. Like, I would assume that you would still have to take the test. So it might not affect them. But Don, I mean, to your question, maybe that helps some kids that are like maybe a little bit of a lower level that aren't good test takers. Like, it's possible. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. It's a really good question. But I think for Notre Dame, I don't think it has much pertinence, because I think you still have to take those tests. Like, you're still going to have to. And honestly, if you are a good enough student to get into Notre Dame, you're probably a pretty good test taker too anyway. So,
yeah, more than likely.
Yeah. So, interesting question, though. I honestly, again, I graduated high school in 2010. I was a middle school teacher, not a high school teacher. So I had no idea that stuff was optional anymore. I had no idea by some people. So it's interesting. But Don, again, thank you for the super chat. And I also wanted to bring up your other chats that you put in a little bit ago. Don O'Malley said, shout out to Peter Jones and Malvern Prep. Beat another loaded team in our prov, the number 2 team in Pennsylvania. Wish it was the O-line and not the D-line dominating, though. Haha. So, yeah, Don, I mean, huge shout out. For people that didn't see that game, Malvern Prep beats Roman Catholic. Sorry, I almost forgot Roman Catholic's name. They beat Roman Catholic 10. Yes, big time schools. They were both undefeated going into that football game. Yeah. They beat Roman Catholic 10-0. Roman Catholic has a dominant wide receiver in the 2024 class, Tysier Denmark. And yeah, I mean, so offensively, not a great showing for Malvern, obviously, right? But definitely not a good showing either for Roman Catholic. So Malvern Prep is a tough physical football team. If you see the scores that they've had this year, like, they're winning a bunch of like low scoring kind of close games this year. So they're a tough team in the trenches, Malvern Prep. So yes, shout out to Peter Jones for that big victory with his team. We had the Spanky ass Sean with the super chat. Spanky, thanks so much. Remember, guys, Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe in year 1. That is true. That is true. I mean, so Sean,
he still hears about it too.
I was about to say, but my point is that I'm sure Alabama fans still talk about it, though, right? Like, you can't lose Louisiana Monroe, I'm sure.
No.
Now, obviously, Nick Saban is made up for that one, right? If Marcus Freeman wins 6 national championships, then I'll be like, yeah, that's all right that we lost to Marshall many moons ago. Still no. Sean's like, nah, still nah.
You will still talk about that visit to Notre Dame Stadium, I promise you. I was there.
Because I was there, yeah. It was, Yep. Oh, man. Just, not a great. It was such a good weekend visit, too. And then that game happened. And yeah, messed everything up a little bit. We had Archer say, mailbag with 23 almost full. When do you think 2024 will really start getting rolling? So, Archer, I think there's a lot of coaches that have kind of already freed themselves up to starting to really ramp up 2024. I mean, all coaches are going to kind of be involved in that moving forward, but There's obviously some key pieces that are still out there, like Jeremiah Love in the running back room and Tayshaun Lyons in the wide receiver room. Let's see who the Viper is in the 2023 class. So Al Washington's going to be busy a little bit with that one. So it's not over at all. So they're still going to be interested in the 2023 class, the quarterback recruiting, of course. Yeah. But ultimately, I think that most coaches have now fully set their eyes to 2024. And I think it's going to start ramping up as soon as – I think it already is ramped up. I mean, Notre Dame has, 5 or 6 commits in the 2024 class right now? I think it's –
so 5. Peter Jones.
Yep, Peter Jones, Cam Williams, Brandon Davis Swain, Owen Waveful,
CJ Carr. That's 6.
6. So they have 6 commits in the 2024 class already. I think you're going to start seeing it ramp up probably after the season, like that winter into the spring, I think is when it really starts kind of bumping up a little bit. Because I think that for the most part, most of the guys that are on Notre Dame's board that I've talked to that have heavier interest in Notre Dame, they've been talking about that spring decision going into their senior year, right? Yep. So I think that's when it really starts to ramp up, and I think it's already kind of been ramping up, Archer, if we're being honest. All right, let's go. Oop. Oh, I just clicked one off that I didn't mean to click off. Darn it. All right, we'll find it. All right, Sean, let's go to this one. I'll let you start this one off. Mailbag. Is Styles' skill set, Lorenzo Styles, best suited for the slot? Seems he dominates from there. Him on slot, Tobias and Lindsey on the outside, ? So you want to start us off there, Sean? Do you think that his style is best in the slot, Lorenzo Styles?
I think he can play any position in the wide receiver room. He really can with his skill set. They began to use him in the slot because of injury last year to Avery Davis. That's when he got moved to the slot. Remember, he didn't play in the slot. Avery Davis goes down late in the season. He ends up playing the slot, ends up having a great game to start the Fiesta Bowl. And, yeah, he can pretty much play any position. He's versatile. You know, I was upset watching the North Carolina game. I don't know if you remember, that was a drive where late in the game, Drew Pine threw the ball so low. If he had just gotten it to Styles, he would have been able to run after the catch probably for another 10 yards when it was over there on the left side. But he's your run after catch guy. He's your interior guy, route runner, deep threat. That's why after his touchdown, I just threw out on Twitter, we don't have any deep threats, huh? It's there are deep threats. You just have to be able to connect when you get the opportunity. And I was happy that Drew Pine threw the ball he did to be able to connect with him. He missed Lindsey later in the game when he had the opportunity. But, yeah, he has a skill set to play in the slot. I don't know if best suited because I think he's able to play all 3 positions. But he's going to excel definitely in the slot.
I personally like Styles anywhere to the field, so I think that he can play that. They call it the X in their position, but it's basically outside receiver. Usually a Z is how people will kind of classify that position, but I think he could play outside, short motion, do all that type of stuff, right? And then in the slot, I think it's easy for him, right? Tobias is definitely a boundary receiver. You want to put him into the short side of the field or let him work on one-on-one coverage. And Braden Lindsey for me, Sean, kind of similar to Styles, but in a different way. I want Braden Lindsey to play mostly on the outside because of his speed, and then he can play a little bit in the slot. Styles is a little more of a 50-50 pure outside slot guy. He can play both those positions. I would not put Lorenzo Styles into the boundary much, though. I've kind of changed my tune on that one. I would not.
Too small. And if I see another, you talked about this, and Brian has talked about this, our receivers in the boundary, allowing defensive backs just to almost run them out of bounds. Dude, inside release, get up on them and then get on the top of them. We got to do a better job of countering that because we saw it. Marshall did it to us the entire game. I saw a couple of times in the boundary, a couple of our wide receivers getting run out of bounds, going downfield. So, yeah.
Yep. And I wanted to pull this up real quick, Sean, because Ryan B said Davis Swain going to Michigan, feeling them out. Look, Sean talked about this on the show last week. He also put this on the message board. If you want to go to boardsideirishbreakdown.com, we talked about the whole Brandon Davis Swain visiting Michigan thing. I don't want to rehash it again, but it's not exactly what that situation was. So if you want to go to the boards.irishbreakdown.com, you'll be able to check in on that intel. All right, Sean, let's start walking through a few of these. So there was a question about NFL draft about the NFL draft. I accidentally clicked it off. So whoever threw that one out there, if you want to retype it and put it in the chat, I deeply apologize. That was from earlier in the show, though. There was a question about the NFL draft. If anybody wants to kind of put that one back in. But yeah. We'll I accidentally clicked it off. I'm an idiot. Jack Kenny said, can Dylan Edwards be the true slot receiver in the class? I'm thinking of the way Amari Rodgers was for Clemson. Yes, he can be the true slot in this class. A little different than Amari. Amari was a little more thick. He was like 205, 210 pounds, kind of a tackle breaker. Dylan Edwards is straight line, stupid fast type of receiver. Like, he's that dude. Could also maneuver through space a ton, has kind of that quick starts, change direction style. But yes, he could definitely be this slot in this class. No doubt about it. All right. We had this question from Milton Fan 15. Any word on edge or quarterbacks for 2023? Look, we already talked about quarterback, Milton Fan. Great question. Edge, there's a couple guys that are on the board for Notre Dame. They're trying to evaluate early on in the fall right now to see what guys kind of take the next step and some guys that they potentially like and where they can get in. So this is kind of a test period for edge right now. So I don't think there's anything imminent, but I think that you should expect some movement this fall on another defensive end in the 2023 class. All right, we had Robert Bishop. I'll let you respond to this one, Sean. Said, man, Drew Pine looks like a different person since the second half of last week. Good for him, no good for us.
I don't get the Latin. No,
he's saying good for him. No, good for us. Like,
gotcha.
Even better for us. Yeah.
All right. Cool. The support system got better. And we're not about to get into banter. Like, I love the response of Drew, and that shows his makeup to face adversity in the first half against Cal, to respond. He didn't have a fantastic second half against Cal, but he didn't lose the game. And he made the plays when they were there. And he continued that trend, and to the point to where that when he got opportunities to make big plays, he made it. There were some throws. I think the throw to Styles was a throw that he made. Like, the way he threw it to the back of the end zone, he made that play. Was it schemed right? Yes, but the throw was excellent. There were a couple of throws he made on third downs to Michael Mayer. Like that one, he stuck it and put it in a position where no one else was going to get that. And Michael Mayer snagged it. It's a great throw. You know, I was asking for like 200 to 220 and 2 touchdowns. That's all I wanted. Like, we can get that from the quarterback position, we're going to win this game. He gives 286 with 2 touchdowns. So, absolutely, he's played better. But we cannot hide that offensive line has stepped it up.
Yeah, it's been a big difference.
Immensely. I'm like, you don't understand. If you don't believe me, ask this guy or the other side. Wait, what? There you go. I'm tripping over here. Like, ask this guy. He watches film. He'll tell you. Like, he wouldn't lie to you. He was waiting to watch the film and say, the performance wasn't as good as I thought. No, they were that good, and I think they're going to get better because it's not about one person. It's about the collective when you're talking about the offensive line in the run game. It really is. Yep. And like, one person can ruin it, but when they work in concert, now you get the type of performance that you're going to get. And once again, it's not like they're about to face the best defensive line against BYU. It's not like they're about to face they're definitely not facing the UNLV game, the Stanford game. It's like this offensive line is going to have the opportunity to dominate games and get better moving forward. So Drew Pine is going to be the beneficiary of that. He is. And as long as he doesn't do the dumb, Notre Dame would be fine. Like, I don't even need what I got last week from him because I think he made some throws. I'm gonna be flat out honest. He made some throws. He even a couple of throws, one to Braden Lindsey, and then there was one to Jaden Thomas, like the little quick 5 to 7 yard out. He banged it on time, and I'm like, yo, if you can do that and hit the play action, I'm all for it. I will say this: he's better turning his back play action than Tyler Buckner was.
The one thing I'll say is, and I talked about this on the show, I wish we could have saw Tyler Buckner with this blocking the way it's going right now. Like, it's so much better. It is. I would have liked to see the development of Tyler Buckner with what is happening right now. So that's my only shame of it. But
which is why his position, I'm going to just throw it because you can continue. Do not overlook that he's right behind Tommy Reese every game. Like, his development is still happening in that booth each and every week, you know. So yeah, it is good for us. I agree, Robert. It's very good for us.
It's very
absolutely good. It's very good for us.
No doubt about that. And then Robert also said that, I just wanted to get a quick laugh here. Did they really run a jet sweep with Michael Mayer? Heck yeah, they did. Yes. Heck yeah, they did. Yes. It was awesome too. It was fantastic, man. I loved it. Loved seeing it. We're going to knock this one out real quick. Ryan B said, you think this recruiting class is going to be beat last year's? Yeah, it already is. It already is, and there's still a couple of spots left. So, yeah, it is. It is. I know there's been a lot of negativity lately. I get it, like Keon Keeley decommitting, Elijah Page decommitting. I get it, man. Trust me, I understand. But it's better right now than last year's recruiting class, in my opinion. So, yeah. Yep. Here was the question I was talking about before. Zach Martin said, Ryan, in a way too early projection, who from the 2022 and 2023 Notre Dame classes, one defense and one offense each, are the best NFL draft prospects? Sean, we got to do this together, man. Got to do this one together. Got to do it. So, 2022 class. So that is the freshman class currently with Benjamin Morrisons of the world, the Jaden Mickeys, Tobias Merriweathers, Eli Raritan. Who, one offense and one defense, are the best NFL draft prospects? All right, so let's go offensively first for 2022. I am going to say Eli Raritan, actually, because I think he's going to be a stud. And it was a close one between him and Tobias, because Tobias is a height, weight, speed type of guy that everyone is going to like. But I am going to go with Eli Raritan because I think he has some pretty rare tools at tight ends.
I'm going to go off the board.
Do it.
Emil Wagner.
Ooh. Love it. Explain it. Let me hear it.
Backup left tackle. Right now, I watched him take and pretty much just demolish, devour, whatever word you want to use. Man, defensive guys that are in the rotation on the defensive line, just take them and just drive them into the ground. Strong kid. It's all about, for him, strong, athletic, played tight end, long arms, great feet. Can he put the weight on? That's it. And I'm going to bank on Matt Balis being able to do his job. If he gets up to 290, 295, as athletic as he is, I saw a clip, a run play to the outside where they actually pulled Joe Alt. I did not know he could get out like that. I was like, okay, I see why they have this kid at left tackle. But dude, look, man, this program is in good hands. Let me just leave it at that. This program is going to be pretty good over the next 2 years. 23 class? No, defense. We have to do defense first, right?
Yeah. So 2022 defensive class. I'll go with.
I mean, at this point, the easiest.
I'm going to go with Benjamin Morrison, I guess. I'll go with Benjamin Morrison. Yeah.
I mean,
long corners go high in the NFL draft that are athletic. So
Yeah, the only person for me that could threaten that just athletically would be probably Jalen Sneed because he's an athletic freak. Like he could be
It's
one
an
of those
interesting one.
players.
Yeah, yeah.
He's one of those players that could just be like so crazy athletic that like yeah,
I,
you know.
I was even thinking like down the line if a Tyson Ford maybe gets a little bigger and it could be like a penetrating three technique inside,
Yeah,
like
that'd
that
be a
could be
good one
something.
too.
Yeah,
That would be
that
a
could be
good one
something
too.
dope.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right. So let's go to the 2023 class, Sean. Let's start defense this time. Start with offense on the 2022 class. Zach, I love this question, by the way, man. This is fun, actually. One defensive player from the 2023 recruiting class on the defensive side of the football, best NFL draft prospect. I would go with Peyton Bowen. If he's in the class, like that's easy for me. That's easy, actually. I
Yeah.
made that harder than it had to be. I made it harder than it had to be, if I'm being honest. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I don't know who else. I don't know who else it would be. Maybe Micah Bell. Maybe Christian Gray. Like I don't know who else it would be, man. Like it's
It would probably be one of the defensive backs,
yeah.
if anyone. Or I mean,
Bubakar,
we could
maybe.
throw
I don't know.
I mean, if Jagasaw turns into oh Jagasaw turns into one of those big time tackles we see at Notre Dame.
Jagasaw would probably be my pick offensively.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he's 6'6", 300 with crazy length, athleticism. Like those guys go very early. If he's the starting offensive tackle for Notre Dame for a couple of years, like, yeah, I get that. I mean, yeah, that one's a clear one for me, actually. So yeah, I'll go Charles Jagasaw offensively. We didn't have much. Yeah.
Or it could be one of the. I mean, I think it could be one of the wide receivers in 23.
Possibly. I mean, if Braylon James puts it all together and he's a 6'3", 215-pound, 4'3" athlete, like, sure. Yeah, sign me up. I would like to say if Jeremiah Love ends up in the class, I would like saying him, but running backs are starting to get a little devalued. So, yeah, exactly. So, great question, though, Zach. Really appreciated that one, man. That was fun. All right, we only got a few more left here. We had Irate Irishman, 88, said, I can't wait to see Greathouse and Rico contributing early as true freshmen next season. Sean, just a statement there. I agree. I think both have a chance to play early for Notre Dame, for sure. Let's go to this question from John Erickson. What happened with Jeremiah Love? Thought it was supposed to be just getting his mom on campus. Since then, nothing. So, John, there has been stuff that's happened, right? So he came for the Marshall game. That went well. He actually enjoyed the visit. Then he went to Texas A&M the weekend after, and he does not have any other visits planned. I was told recently last week that the plan was for Jeremiah to still have the decision figured out before the end of the month. So he's in decision-making time. So you probably won't hear anything about him for a couple more days, but we should know something, at least a decision date set by the end of the month, I believe. Not that he will make his decision necessarily by the end of September, but that a decision will be made in September for an announcement sometime in the near future. So that's kind of the update. It's a Notre Dame, Texas A&M battle. Also, there's other teams that have tried to get in, like Oregon, Michigan, but right now I would say those are the two teams that are at the top for Jeremiah Love. All right, we just had also a question from Blake Kajar. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that name completely wrong, I'm sure. Anywhere on Jeremiah Love's and Lions. We were just talking about Jeremiah Love's commitment possibilities. I had an update on Tayshaun Lyons on the board and on a article last week. So Tayshaun original plan was to commit at the end of October, but he told me that that's tentative, but then also it could happen anytime. Like if he wakes up one day and he's just like, yep, I'm done, then it'll be done type of thing. So I would expect maybe something by the end of next month, what might be possible, but it could happen literally anytime, according directly from Tayshaun Lyons. So it's the update on him. Getting through these quick. Irish IQ, what do you think the win-loss record for the 2022 needs to be to land or on to keep belief in wait, let's go back here. What do you think the win-loss for 2022 needs to be to land or keep belief in our new recruits moving forward and maintaining a top recruiting class? Sean, do you think that there's a record that they have to be at least at for Notre Dame not to worry too much about people second guessing the commitments, all that type of stuff, I guess is the question.
No, not really. Other than a collapse, yeah, you talking about 5-7, 6-6, or something like that? No. If this team continues to play well and beat the teams they're supposed to beat, the recruiting class will be fine for the most part. I mean, Peyton Bowen is the one that sticks out, and that might be important for him, but they have done a great job recruiting this class and establishing family and brotherhood in this class. So it's deeper for the guys that are part of the 23 class. Like they feel like they are part of the change that's coming to Notre Dame.
Yes.
They legitimately feel that. That's why you lose at Marshall and the 3 wide receivers in the class share their text thread from the game on social media, pretty much saying, wait till we get there next year. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no talk of decommitment. It's like, okay, just wait until we get there next year. And that's just everyone's bought in to the class and the importance of it. So
yeah, I think that that's a great way to put it, Sean, is that I think that a lot of the recruits in the class that are committed think of themselves as not the fix, but like they are what's going to drive this to the next level, right? Like they're the fuel to what Marcus Freeman wants to build. So yeah, I agree. So team question. Kick that one back to you, Sean, from David Penny. Team question. Merriweather is going to get on the field after the bye week, right? Right?
Depends on whether or not you can trust them.
I guess. Yeah, that's what it seems to be.
I know. I mean,
did you roll your eyes while you said that?
I did. I did. Kind of like the way Tobias Merriweather walked past Drew Pine on the sideline and tapped him on the helmet in the fourth quarter. Yeah. I don't know if you guys missed that.
Mm-hmm.
But he walked by him and tapped him on the head and said, good game.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm being super petty right now. Mm-hmm. Super duper petty.
It's all right, man.
I tweeted out during the game, and I'll say it here. I won't say his name. There's a certain receiver that's not doing anything different that can't be done by Tobias Merriweather. There is nothing the receiver that's getting reps is doing that Tobias Merriweather needs to build trust to do. I don't need to build trust to be an outlet receiver on the backside in the red zone. I don't. So I don't get it. But hey.
All right. Well, someone just said Sean is on the petty train, and I agree a little bit, but we're all allowed to be on that train at some point, Sean. I'm on my petty train all the time, my friend. So Jay Henry said, we only have 3 questions left to think. Did the A&M outcome against Arkansas have any impact on Jeremiah Love's recruitment? Jay, I haven't heard it word for word if it moved the needle or not, right? But all I'll say is that they were on the trip when Texas A&M beat Miami the week before, and at that time, that looked like a good win. That was before Miami lost this past weekend, right? It looked like a good win at that point. But I mean, like again, the direct quote was from the source near Jeremiah Love that trip didn't move the needle, right? And that's with the 12th man and everything going, and so I doubt that it had that big of a movement. But again, I haven't talked to Jeremiah Love specifically about Texas A&M beating Arkansas, but I tend to think that one didn't register that high with him. But that's a little bit of my opinion on that one.
Oh, I was so mad at Arkansas losing that game.
I know, man. I picked them too.
Place kickers, boy, I tell you.
Oh, speaking of that, did you see the end of the I was watching the end of the Missouri-Auburn game this morning. Did you see how that one ended?
I did not, but you're a good one for watching that.
It was 14-14 with like 3 seconds left. Missouri had a 26-yard field goal. Wide rights went to overtime.
From 26?
26 yards. For Aaron Mevis, who's a good kicker, Sean. He's a good kicker.
I'm gonna be honest.
He's been 80-something% the last 2 years.
I think I could walk out on the football field and kick a 26-yarder right now.
Think so?
26? That's what, from the 15?
Nah, that's not even from the 15. That is 17 plus 9. That's from the 9-yard line.
From the 9? Oh, boy.
9-yard line.
Yes, yeah. I feel pretty comfortable.
Well, the ball's spotted at the 9. That's from the 16-yard line. Sure.
I think I'll be fine.
I am so funny, man. They kept closing in on Mevis leading up to the kick. They're like, oh, he never takes practice kicks. It's like, oh, okay. And then he missed the 26-yarder. Not great, man. Not great. Last couple here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I already had it up. Jason Rose said, hey, guys, with Bertrand being unreliable and Kaiser struggling, what would your linebacker group like moving forward? What would it look like moving forward? For me, Sean, talked about this a ton. So we have I'm into a rotation, right? Like, I'm not throwing either one of these guys out the door. Like, I'm not saying, like, you guys aren't playing anymore, but I'm saying, like, there's guys that are going to be competing and there's guys going to be playing. Like, I need to see more Prince Collie. Need to see it. I need to see some other solution at Rover as well to mix in with Kaiser. So whether that is Jalen Sneed or you get some reps from Maris Loifau at Rover, regardless, these three are playing. Marist, JD Bertrand, and Kaiser are all going to play. But the point is that there's going to be a heavier rotation of getting guys like Prince Collie on the field, getting Junior Tuilamaka on the field, getting maybe a Jalen Sneed on the field. I need to get those younger guys, start getting them some reps.
And I think Brian made this point. You'll start seeing guys like Jalen Sneed and probably Nolan Ziegler start cracking and getting reps on special teams, on coverage teams. And once you start seeing them playing coverage, then you might see them getting the opportunity to actually get on the field. Prince Collie, I'm right there with you. There's no excuse for him and Junior Tuilamaka to get more reps, especially if JD Bertrand is going to be out. There are more reps because we're going to see Maris, particularly in passing situations, possibly coming off the edge in certain situations. So now your inside linebackers in coverage, which Kaiser struggles with a little bit. Bo Bow, like you said, rotation. You'll get Bowen there. You'll get Kaiser in there. But, you'll have guys coming in getting about 20 plays. If Junior and Prince, start getting 20 to 25 reps a game, then you have to feel good about that combination and what you have from a depth standpoint at linebacker.
Prince Collie needs to play, and I want him to start playing more Mike than Will, if I'm being honest, man. Downhill, that kid is ferocious. Yeah. I want to see it. See it. Very talented player. And he only played a few snaps this past game, but in my opinion, there was no better run-fill linebacker in the snaps that he played than Prince Collie.
He got into the backfield so fast on one play that I think he messed up the running back. I think the running back saw the flash,
and then he went down. Yeah,
and he just went down. Like, yo, what is that?
Yeah. I'll send you that. I'll send you that clip, Sean. I have it on the coach's film. It's pretty hysterical. I clipped it, so I'll send that to you afterwards. It's pretty funny. All right, so great question again, Jason. Appreciate it. Archer said, Ryan and Sean also updated college football predictions after week 4. Who's your top 4, Sean? We got top 4 teams for you. I'm going to go Georgia, Alabama. Still, right? Ohio State. Who's the 4th?
This is interesting. Who's your 4th?
I'm thinking, man. I don't even.
No, I'm thinking not like best 4 teams right now. I'm thinking like who I think is going to get there.
Gotcha. So you're not doing it after week 4. You're saying who do you think?
It's after week 4, but it's kind of like
still got to project it.
Consideration like their schedule and stuff. I think Utah is going to be the 4th. I think that loss to Florida really doesn't hurt them because they're going to run the table in the Pac-12. I think they're going to be the 4th. I really do. I
hope so, man. I like Utah. I like Kyle Whittingham. Yeah. I really like Kyle Whittingham. Morgan Scalley at as defensive coordinator. I hope. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know who the fourth team is. I need to. Someone just said Tennessee. Tennessee does look good, but like I don't know. You're not going to get 3 SEC teams though in the Final Four. Like that's not going to happen.
I'm very intrigued in the Tennessee Georgia game now, though. I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see that, but I think Georgia and Bama will be in the SEC championship. The only other team, I mean, you can say Clemson, but I think Clemson trips up in the ACC. I really do at some point. Maybe Devin Leary and State gets them. Notre Dame, maybe they get them.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I mean, Clemson could end up there. But I'm just like I said, I'm looking at Utah and I'm looking at Clemson right now. I would take Utah as a team. Like they're just better in my opinion.
Yeah,
the defense is not better.
Yeah. They have a smart quarterback. They have a good running game.
Yes. Tight end is phenomenal as well.
Dalton Kincaid, yeah, he's a good player, man. He's a good player. Yeah, we'll see. It's a good question, Archer. I just need to see a little more of a couple of these teams, I think.
I see someone said Michigan. I'm not.
I think Michigan's a good team, but
I was impressed with Maryland.
They played a tough football game.
I came away impressed with Maryland if Tao doesn't get hurt, doesn't injure his hip in the third quarter. The fact that he continued to play and they came back and got within one possession and their defense just couldn't hold up. Yeah. That Michigan defense against the run because, dude, Maryland lined up and physically ran the ball on Michigan for about 2.5 quarters.
Yep.
And like with the 3 running backs that Penn State has, if Michigan doesn't take care of that, I never thought I would see the day that I would say Sean Clifford would get a big win in the Big Ten. But Ryan, we might be on the genesis of it happening.
Well, Sean, I mean, the kid's been in college for 20 years. It had to happen at some point, right? Let's be honest, man.
If you throw a rock in the ocean, it's going to hit water, right?
At some point, man, it's going to hit. Yeah. Josh P wants me to say NC State. I'm not going to say NC State. Sorry, Josh P. I'm not going to. I like a lot of what NC State has, man. Devin Leary is a good football player. I actually coached against Sumo, their running back. He was a Woodrow Wilson kid here in Jersey. Or was he Willingboro? But either way, I coached against him. I can't remember which one he was at. But Sumo's a good football player. NC State's a good team, man. I don't think Final Four, though. I don't think Final Four, but we'll see.
Right.
We'll see. Last question of the day. Ian Johnson said, how would y'all rank the corners? I have 1 is Tariq Bracy, 2 Clarence Lewis, and tied for 3rd with Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison. This is interesting. I would agree with Ian on this one, Sean, that Tariq Bracy's number 1 for me so far. He has been phenomenal, man. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think I actually might go with this order. I mean,
he's one of the best. Man, his story is just so phenomenal. Like, he's second day? Can he work himself up to second, third round?
Who's that? Who are we talking about?
Tariq Bracy.
Probably not.
Depends on how he runs.
He's going to run well. He's had some injuries and he's had inconsistent play throughout his career. So I'd say he's more a day 3 player, but I do think he could stick on a roster at the next level for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good for him.
Well, I was saying that yesterday on the show, Sean. I did the Upon Further review with Vince last night, and man, I was just talking about Tariq Bracy for a second because I'm like, all the trials and tribulations that young man's been through during his career. Good for him sticking it out, man, and playing good football. For sure, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And putting in that work.
Yeah. And I think that for me, the question comes down to, look, Cam Hart has had his struggle this year. There's been no doubt. But there's also been a lot of good that Cam Hart has done. It's just the bad that we've seen has been when they're throwing the football. It just happens to be against him at points, right? But I would say based upon just what each player is producing with the role they have, I would go to Tariq Bracy. I would also go Clarence Lewis. Good for him also, a kid that was under fire this whole offseason. And then I would say Ben Morrison and then Cam Hart. And if Cam Hart's your 4th best productive corner, or not productive, because he's going to have more production than a couple of those guys. But if he's your fourth most efficient corner, then you're in a pretty good spot, man. You're in a pretty good spot at that point. But yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, Cam has eligibility to come back next year.
He does. I think he actually has 2 years if he wanted to use it, but
Right.
he's a redshirt junior, senior in the classroom. He can come back for a 5th year if he wanted to. Yes.
So he came up a little lame late in the North Carolina game.
Yep.
I don't know if people saw that. So hopefully the 2 weeks off can get him back right. But we're talking about my rankings like at this very moment. Dude, you give me Bracy and then give me the 2 freshmen. And Clarence Lewis has responded very nicely.
Sure has.
But give me Bracy, the 2 freshmen, and then I'll take Hart Lewis. Like I'm so dude,
You're in, man.
I'm so bullish on these 2 freshmen.
See, I can't quite put Mickey that high though, because he's making some mistakes, and he's going to, right? But
yeah,
I just can't quite put him that high. But I'm very high on him long term. There's no doubt. Jade Mickey can play.
But I haven't seen. You know what? I will put Lewis 3.
Yeah,
and then I will put Mickey and Hart. But Ben Morrison is definitely the second best.
I'm fine with that.
I'm
fine with that opinion. Amen. I am fine with that opinion. I'm fine. Another great question, Ian. That's actually going to end the show for today. This was the mailbag section. Want to thank everybody for joining us today again for the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour. Before you leave, do not leave yet. I better not see those numbers drop. Before you leave, please hit the like, share, hit that notification bell. I will be here all week. Tomorrow we'll be back here with Brian Driscoll. Hope again if you all can just send a good thought and prayer out to Brian and with what that he's dealing with right now. Would generally appreciate it. No, it's just been a rough couple of days for him, but we thank him as always for putting out this great platform that we get to talk ball, which is always a fantastic time. Hit that notification bell, hit the like button, hit that all good stuff. If you are listening on on your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. For Mr. Sean Davis, I am Ryan Roberts. Thank you all so much for joining the Irish Breakdown Podcast.